taking control, shoveling dirt in every hole. Predators to condemn your soul, watching you and watching me. We're all connected but separated, misunderstood and so frustrated. A million armies of one have invaded, watching you and watching me. We live behind glass curtains and act like nothing's wrong. Soon you will belong. I know you're out there somewhere. We've watched you for so long. Wait for you to fall. We'll expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. The little brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized. Everyone's got an electric eye, we're the digital spies. They've watched you for so long. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. We the people have taken over. We the people are little brother, standing by to dethrone each other, watching you and watching me. Paranoid, the lens is our weapon, desensitized in our lust for attention, democratized by our voyeur obsessions, watching you and watching me. Slaves to perfection, don't let them project you as you are. Reveal your every flaw. I know you're out there somewhere. We've watched you for so long. Wait for you to fall. We'll expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. Little brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized. Everyone's got an electric eye, we're the digital spies. They've watched you for so long. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. Stay in line, don't make a mistake. We're watching. We watched you for so long. We wait for you to fall. We will expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere watching
Let your experience begin right now. From high atop the mountains of British Columbia to you listening around the world, this is Spaced Out Radio. You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, on Twitter, @SpacedOutRadio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can follow us on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR, or on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride as we are live on Spaced Out Radio.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The deeper I go, the deeper I
fall. I'm going to just read a nice little warm-up intro, and then we'll have 4-minute commercial breaks at the bottom here. Welcome to Space Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott, and thank you so much for tuning in and listening in at spacedoutradio.com and on Spreaker. As once again we come in from the frozen Canadian tundra, battle our way past the wild animals, sidestep Bigfoot, and enter Uncle Jimbo's cabin, stoke the fire, heat this place up, and broadcast you live on this Tuesday night, early Wednesday morning if you're on the East Coast. Here at Spaced Out Radio, we do this thing 3 hours a night, 7 days a week. Why? We get that question a lot. Well, the answer is simple. We want to be your official one-stop shop when it comes to the conspiratorial, ufological, extraterrestrial, supernatural, and so much more. Spaced Out Radio's theme music is provided by the guitar god himself, Ron Bumblefoot Thal, formerly of Guns N' Roses. Yeah, he's a fan of this show. You can find his album Little Brother is Watching by going to our website, spacedoutradio.com. If you're on social media, give us a follow on Twitter, @SpacedOutRadio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, I can be followed at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. And of course, our website is spacedoutradio.com. At this time, we welcome in our fans listening in on the SHR Media Network, in the Spaced Out Radio chat room on Spreaker, along with our fans on Facebook at Euphoria Chronicles, Forest Moon Paranormal, Chronicles of the Unknown, and the SOR Space Travelers, our flagship chat room for this show. If you're a fan of SOR, coming soon to our website is our Space Travelers membership, where for only $5 a month, you'll win prizes, take part in private group interviews, a monthly newsletter, a special section on our website, and so much more. Hey, we're going to give you a hell of a lot more than just access to our archives. Tonight's show is brought to you by Rivulet Reiki and Readings, providing healings in person or at a distance. PurplePlates.com, helping heal your body, mind, and soul. The official paper of this show is the New Agora newspaper, and the iTunes app Spirit Storybox. It's the official ghost hunting app of Spaced Out Radio. It's amazing what a UFO sighting on the prairies of Canada can do to affect a person's life. It can be life-altering, changing one's path because the need to know outweighs everything else. Well, almost 40 years ago, Canadian ufologist Grant Cameron has become one of the most respected researchers in the world when it comes to the little green men and what they want with this watery planet we call Earth. Grant's focus is kind of ironic. Here we have a Canadian researcher who's become the foremost expert on the ties between UFOs and the White House. How does this happen? Grant has written and studied the correlation between presidents of the United States from Eisenhower to Obama to see what they know or what they are hiding when it comes to the field of aliens. It's a subject that we've said on this show many of times is the biggest story in mankind's history, next to Jesus Christ himself coming down from the heavens to proclaim his existence. As part of the Alien Cosmic Expo happening this weekend in Brantford, Ontario, Grant will be one of the keynote speakers on this topic. He will delve heavily into the disclosure movement and what we've learned from previous information, leading right into the Hillary Clinton-John Podesta team trying to lead the Democrats back into the White House. We welcome in Grant Cameron into Spaced Out Radio now. Grant, thank you so much for being with us tonight. How are you?
Just fine, Dave. Wonderful intro. I loved it.
Well, you know what? You're one of those people to me, Grant, who is kind of a hero of mine. And you know, I'm not saying that to kiss butt here or anything like that, but when I started learning about the field of ufology after my own personal experiences, to find a fellow Canadian who has as much knowledge and as much going on as you do in this field, it really elevated my interest, because here in Canada, the field of ufology, as we've talked with Victor Vigiani and Bob Mitchell about this, really is still one of those taboo subjects that is campfire fodder. It's not mainstream conversation, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's true. In the States, it's much bigger than it is here, but you can count all the researchers in Canada basically on one hand.
Absolutely. And why do you think that is, Grant?
We don't have the conspiratorial thing. I've wrote a book a couple of years ago, where I detailed my sort of guess that the American government is actually leaking this stuff. They're keeping the classified stuff withheld, but they're leaking it. For example, like you know that in 1969 the U.S. Air Force shut down Blue Book. The Canadians shut their program down in 1967. And the Canadians never, ever talked about it again. And I couldn't really tell you who in the Canadian government knows or what they know. I have no idea whatsoever. But in the United States, so they shut down in 1969. And then I tell a story a little bit in this book about Bob Emenegger, who was a associate producer on a documentary. He was a vice president of Gray Advertising in Los Angeles. And Gray Advertising has always been seen to be a front company for the CIA. Now, Bob didn't have anything to do with that, but he was called on by an associate of his, and the associate said, the U.S. Defense Department wants us to do some documentaries. And Bob really wasn't into UFOs. This is 1972. So you got to see, the U.S. Air Force has shut the whole thing down, and if they just shut their mouth, nobody would ever ask them a question. They said there's nothing to it, and it just sort of died. But in 1972, the Defense Department contacts Bob Emenegger and Alan Sandler, who was the actual connection, the guy with the intelligence connections, and they get taken to Norton Air Force Base, and they say, you know, we're having a tough time. It's the Vietnam War. The U.S. military is not being seen in very good light, and we'd like you to do these documentaries. So they gave them a documentary on working with dolphins and 3D holography and all this kind of stuff, and they give them about 8 documentaries to do. And then they say, and we'd also like you to do this UFO documentary, but we'd like you to hide it under the others. And Bob's looking at the guy, this Paul Charlotte, who was the security manager at Norton Air Force Base, where they store all the U.S. military film back at that point for all the different military services. And he said, what would you say if we told you that the U.S. Air Force had actually filmed the landing of an alien spacecraft at Holloman Air Force Base and the beings coming out? And Bob's going, are you kidding me? And he's like, he used to bug his wife, like, Margaret, quit reading that National Enquirer, the alien had my baby type thing. He thought it was absolute nuts. And he said, suddenly this guy, security manager, is telling him this thing's for real and that the U.S. Air Force actually filmed this thing. And so here you have the U.S. Air Force is out of it. But in 1972, they start leaking this story of this landing at Holloman Air Force Base. So which it indicates that they didn't want it. They wanted the story out. They wanted to leak this stuff. And I detailed a whole pile of stuff that the government has leaked from time to time. And basically what they're doing is they're telling you the story of what's going on, but they're protecting the classified material. Whereas in Canada, the Canadian government hasn't been involved. Like in the early years, and I eventually now will do the book because I now know how to publish books on my own, but I'm going to do the Canadian government story. And in the early 1950s, the Canadian government was the leading area of research in the whole world. Wilbur Smith, who ran the Canadian government UFO program, was sitting on the board of Nightcap. He was written up in Fate magazine, newspapers all across Canada. Canada was actually in the know as to what was going on, and they were very open about what was going on. But as soon as they shut that program down in 1954, after that, and I worked on it very hard. I've got all the documents before 1954. After that, there really is nothing. There really is. It just goes into a black hole. And the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. military could have done the same thing. It's just shut your mouth, don't say anything. But every time they turn around, they're leaking a story about this happening, that happening, and they just keep it going. They just, like, the fire is just about to go out, and they throw a couple of logs and then some gasoline on the fire and get the fire going again. So that's why I think it's so big in the States, is that the military or the government or whoever is actually stoking the fire.
How did you get involved, Grant, with finding out all this information about presidents of the United States and the ufology field? Because for a lot of people, you think that would be such an American topic, and yet here you are, a guy from Manitoba, small-town Manitoba, delving right into it, digging deep, and getting the information that you need.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned in the intro that I had this sighting in 1975. It wasn't until 30 years later I picked up the fact that maybe the reason that it happened in Carman, Manitoba, where this was all taking place, which is about 30 miles southwest of Winnipeg, that the U.S. had, before Star Wars came in with Reagan, but before Star Wars, they had the same idea, and they had the only anti-ballistic missile unit that ever went operational in the United States went operational 80 miles south of the town where all this happened, on the American side of the border in a town called Nakoma, North Dakota. And they had 100 nuclear missiles. They had these 5 megaton warheads. And what they would try to do is they had this big radar establishment, which was called Nixon's Pyramid. It was a big, huge, giant, looked like a pyramid with radar, high-tech radar in it. And what they would try to do is pick up the Russians if the Russians were to launch nuclear attack. This radar array would pick up the thing, and then they would launch these 5 megaton missiles and try to knock down the Russian the intercontinental ballistic missiles before they came in. And if those missed, then they had these 1 megaton sprint missiles that would fire, and what they would try to do is hit it as it was coming in and cause all this sort of like a cloud, which would destroy all the missiles as they were coming in. And the reason they did that was because most people don't realize that the main target of the Russians was not the American cities or the Canadian cities. The main target of the Russian intercontinental ballistic missiles was the American missiles. Because if you can take out the cities, that's not going to help you. If you don't take out the American missiles, you're gone. So that was the number one target. And we in Winnipeg knew that if there was ever a nuclear attack, we were gone. Because every 10th Russian missile is going to land short right on top of us. So we knew if there's a nuclear attack, we were gone, because we already knew we had these, I think they had at one point 400 nuclear missiles, like some with 10 warheads on them, in North Dakota. They're all over the place, and we would drive through North Dakota, and we'd all see these things, a missile silo in the middle of some farmer's field. So what had happened was 1975, they opened this thing in February, and these sightings start exactly the same time, February of 1975, just before the Vietnam War is ending. So the Vietnam War ends at the end of April, and I tell my friends, it's in Winnipeg, it's a big news story, and newspapers are covering it, and I say to my friend, we should drive around Winnipeg. Nothing better to do. And I said, well, instead of driving around Winnipeg, why don't we go out and see what everybody's looking at? I cannot remember having any interest in UFOs. I had interest in Edgar Cayce. I had an interest in near-death studies and stuff like that. I'd done a paper at the university on dying patients, and do you see dying people? Was there miracles? Did people predict their death? And all these weird things that happen around death. I had done a paper. So I was interested in that, but I can't remember being interested in UFOs. The only reason that I wanted to go to Carman, Manitoba was because everybody was seeing this. I was just thought, well, let's go see what they're looking at. This. And so we didn't go. And then what happened is CKY TV, which is the affiliate of the network in Winnipeg, actually catches this thing on the ground, and it jumps, and they catch this thing as it jumps off the ground. This happens in about May the 11th, 1975. So this goes viral. NBC picks it up. It's all over the news, and they show this object jumping up in the sky, and then this wave pattern as this thing flies across the sky. And I said to my friend, "Come on, Larry, let's go see what they're looking at." So we went out, and I've described it 100 times. I said it was like buying the lottery ticket and knowing there's a chance you can win, but knowing you're not going to win. I figured there's no way we're going to see anything. We'll go out there. Everybody else sees it. We're not going to see anything. So we went out there, and we drove into town, out of town, into town, out of town, in and out, and we were there for about an hour. And we were looking at different stuff in the sky, and we said, is this it? Is that it? And we're watching planets and stars. And I had no interest in astronomy. I didn't know what we're looking at. It was like, but I remember saying, well, if that's what they're looking at, and you see a planet's Venus setting or whatever, I said, well, if that's what they're looking at, that's not very impressive. So we couldn't figure this out. And then my friend said to me, Larry says, okay, we're going to drive back into Carmen one more time. If we don't see anything, we're going home. I said, fine with me. This is a total waste of time. We turn the car around. We're coming in. It comes from the left to the right. It's down low. It's almost like maybe 100 feet in the air, 150 feet in the air, very, very low, coming right in front of the car, and nobody in the car. It's like we were, for an hour, we were saying, is that it? Is that it? Is that? Nobody said, is that what they're looking at? I wonder if that's what. Everybody just went, there it is. Everybody instantly knew. It was so bizarre, and it's so hard to describe to people. It was just so unusual. And it was coming from the left to the right, and right in front of the car, down low, and it was coming across, and it was like a heart. It was like beating. It was pulsing like a heart, very slow, moving very, very slow, maybe 30 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour at the most, much slower than a plane. And I remember there was a set of school buses that they parked outside of Carmen, and it was going, you could see it was going to go in behind the school buses, and I wouldn't be able to see it anymore. So the car was still moving, and I was jumping out of the car to run through the ditch to get through this parking lot so I could get to the buses, so I could watch this thing when it got in behind the buses. And I remember this thing just pulsing away, and it just was sort of pulsing, and to me it was like the impression was like, what are they doing? They're just like burning gas. They were just flying along, not seem to be doing anything. Just flew off into the northeast towards a little bit north of, heading like north of Winnipeg. So I drag all my friends out there and everybody that I've respected, and I drag them all out there 2 nights later. And I remember we were sitting there, and they were there for an hour, and they had the same impression of me as the first night. It's like, well, we're going to come out here, we're not going to see anything, and they didn't see anything. And then after an hour, they all said to me, Grant, we're going home. We've had enough. We're going to go home. And I said, no, you got to see this, man. This will change your life, man. You see this, it's unbelievable. And they said, no, I still remember. They said, it was about 12:30 at night, and they said, nope, we're hungry. We're going back to Winnipeg for pizza. And they got in their cars, and all my friends, and they all took off and left 8 of us there. There was 2 cars, and about 15 minutes later, I had some kids who were doing science fair projects sitting in the field, and there was a flash in the sky. Not the way we saw it the first night, just this flash, like a flash cube. If people remember the old flash, it's a flash in the sky. And then I could hear the one kid yelling, is that it? And I'm going, I don't know, maybe. I don't know. And then it flashed again, but it was like 8 inches in the field of vision. It was just like we call it later on. Some kids described it perfectly. These little kids I interviewed, they described it as a bouncing ping pong ball. That's what it looked like, a bouncing ping pong ball bouncing around in the sky. And just pandemonium breaks out here. And there's a car beside it, and it's a courier car. It was a Roadrunner courier car. And I remember there was 3 guys, and there was a girl there. And this is when motor drives first came out on cameras, on the old Nikon cameras. And you had to dance it quickly with this motor drive on the camera. And I remember people yelling, screaming as this thing was coming towards us. And the flashes got closer and closer together, but it was still jumping all over the place. And I can still remember the girl, she was crying because she couldn't see it. She said, where is it? I can't see it. And everybody was ignoring it. And there was people swearing, and it was just unbelievable. And as it got closer, it suddenly turned into this object I'd seen the first night. It changed from this flashing thing to this red pulsing object. It was coming right at us, down very low, moving very, very slow. It had this green glow on the back of it. And it sort of paused there, and then it made the turn, and we were on the west side of the town. It made the turn, and it went around the northwest side of the town. And I remember as it was making the turn and heading into the northeast, the other people in the other car said, we're going to chase it. And I still remember that they got in the car, and they took off, and the gravel was flying, they took off. And I was sort of hooked. And I said, well, why is nobody covering this? I was out there 2 nights in a row, and I saw this thing fairly close, got a very good look at the thing. And I said, this is unreal. Nobody's covering the story. So I start interviewing all the people in the town. And I do a poll at the high school, and I lecture at various schools around there and stuff. I do like a poll at the high school that 59% of the kids in the high school said they'd seen something in the last 2 years, which was like a very high percentage. So most of the town was seeing it. A lot of them didn't want to talk about it. Didn't want to, the only reason they would talk is because somebody would squeal on them. And then they would squeal on 3 people, and then those people would squeal on other people. And that's how I got these names. So I wrote this manuscript. I put the manuscript. It went to Toronto. One company read it, and they decided, no, they didn't want to publish it. The local Winnipeg publisher, a big publisher here, I sent it to her, and I can still remember the rejection letter. It said, Mr. Cameron, you may believe in this kind of stuff. Count me among the unbelievers. And I was just floored. I could not believe it. And from that day on, I have never done sightings. I said, this is a total waste of time. I recorded all these sightings, and they're all very interesting. And I can tell you the time I just about jumped on one and all these weird stories. But it really doesn't mean anything. It's just a story. It's things that happened to me. And all I was interested, as soon as I got that rejection letter, all I was interested in is, what did I see? Somebody has to know what that was that I saw. And I start on this track to find out who's got the answer. And that's when I went to the Canadian government, because synchronistically, one of the people who worked in my father's office, my father worked for the Department of Transport. He was a pilot. And he actually flew around Paul Hellyer. Paul Hellyer at one point was the head of the Department of Transport. So in his office, there was a bunch of all the accident investigation people were in his office. My father inspected runways up in the Arctic and stuff like that. And there was this guy by the name of Ernie Epp, and he was a radar tech who worked in my father's office, and he'd had a sighting in this Kármán flap. So my father said, oh, Ernie saw something. He wants to talk to you. So I meet this guy, and he tells me this whole story. And then he says at the end of his conversation, he says to me, you know, if you really want to know what's going on with UFOs, you should study Wilbur Smith. I used to work for the guy. He was the smartest guy I ever met in my life, but he was nuts. I mean, he was talking to aliens that were landing in his backyard. And I went, what? What are you talking about? And he said he ran the Canadian government UFO program. I said, he did? And he said, yeah, but he was talking to these aliens, and the alien's name was Alpha. And I remember he said, because we used to make a joke. We say, oh, yeah, half a pint. Have another one, Wilbur. And so he worked for him, and he was if you remember the story back in 1954 when the Canadians shut the program down, what happens is Wilbur Smith is going through a contactee in the United States by the name of Francis Swan, who sets up this alien, Alpha, to fly over the Canadian capital. And it was supposed to happen on August the 1st. It actually happens exactly a week later on August the 8th. They're all in this station that Wilbur has built on defense property, where they've got their change in magnetic field, change in noise. They've got all these different monitoring things to detect a flying saucer coming over the Capitol. And this Ernie Epp, who's in my father's office, who tells me this Wilbur Smith story, happens to actually be there on the day when this happens. And he said we ran outside and you couldn't see anything. It was overcast, and this thing went right off the paper. The pens go right off the paper. And he was the guy that changed the paper. He was just a junior engineer at the time, and he would change the paper in these monitoring things. So he tells me the story, and then so what I do is I go to Ottawa to interview Wilbur Smith's wife. Wilbur Smith, the guy that ran the Canadian government program, died in 1962. So this is now in 1977. I go there and I want to talk to his wife. And she says, yeah, come down. I'll talk to you. And I go there and she says, we're going to go to my son's house, James Smith. Get in the car. I've got to rent a car. She jumps in the car. We start going down to her son's place. And she starts talking about this Alpha, like it's the family pet. Oh, Alpha this and Alpha that. And she starts telling me all these stories about Wilbur and the government and how the government stole all these patents that Wilbur had. And I'm thinking, wow. I mean, it was like, this young kid, and it's just like just the most unbelievable story I've ever heard in my life. And I go to her son's place, and they talk about how the government tried to recover the files, and they were breaking into the house, and they gave them to James, and James kept them secret, and she told the government that she destroyed the files, and all this sort of stuff. And that, of course, when I did the Wilbur Smith thing, I recovered all the documents, and I sort of knew what was going on there, get the whole Canadian top secret memo where the Canadian government actually says they talked to the Americans, and the Americans told them it's the most highly classified subject in the United States. Flying saucers exist. There's a mental phenomena associated with the flying saucers and stuff like that. And so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to find out, where did Wilbur Smith get these this material from the Americans. Who was he talking to in the United States? Because I'm on this trek. Somebody's got to have the answer. So Wilbur Smith was talking to somebody in the States, and he used American authorities. In the top secret memo, he talks about American authorities. And we find out about this Dr. Robert Saubacher, who ran the Washington Institute in Washington, D.C., did lab stuff. He was did work for different, military agencies, doing things for them. And he basically confirms, yes, there was a crash. There was a briefing took place at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base about the crash, the bodies, and all this kind of stuff. And he didn't have time to go. And he names off all these scientists like von Braun, von Neumann, and he names Eric Walker. These people that actually went, because Stanton Friedman was talking to him. He said, and he was naming all these people, and Stanton says, well, is there anybody that still might be alive of all the people that went to this briefing in 1950 at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base? And he said, yeah, this guy from Pennsylvania, he thought he knew everything. He was really arrogant, and he describes this guy. And another researcher does the research and tracks it down to be Dr. Eric Walker, who's the former president of Penn State University, 14 honorary doctorate degrees, worked for Eisenhower on engineering papers, was good friends with Milton Eisenhower, was the president at Penn State before him, was chairman of the board of the Institute for Defense Analysis, the top military think tank in the United States, was an executive secretary in the Department of Defense, high, powerful guy, who basically, when we phone him and say, oh, what about this MJ-12 thing? This is when the document was released in 1987. He said, I've known of them for 40 years. Leave it alone. There's nothing you can do. You're up against the windmills. And I start this chase for Dr. Eric Walker. And this is how we get to the presidents. We're chasing Walker around for 8 years. And we basically put out a book that describes what Walker told us. And he was talking in rhymes and riddles and told us a number of things that I wouldn't figure out for years. But he was basically riddling and telling us indirectly confirming some of the stuff that was going on. So when I'm looking for his material, after he dies, I'm looking for his material and I'm trying to we're putting the book together. I go to Penn State University and I'm reading through some of his papers. And in one of the papers, he talks about the Defense Research Board files. And this was the agency where he was when this briefing took place at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in 1950. So I'm reading through these files and he writes a letter to the Truman Library and offers them that he might put these files in the Truman Library. So this is what I'm looking for. I mean, this is big time. So I go to the Truman Library, not to find out what the president knows, but to get Dr. Eric Walker's defense file. So I get there and they don't have the defense file. And that's at that point when I suddenly realize that this is the most powerful guy in the world. So I asked the question, what kind of documents do you have on UFOs in the Truman administration? So they basically say, okay, we got, if you remember back in 1952, there was the overflight of Washington, D.C. And you have the first week and then the second week. And in between, Truman does a shoot-down order. He said, if they don't obey, we're going to shoot them down. And this gets into the paper. And, of course, it's all over the newspaper. And a bunch of telegrams go into the White House telling the president, don't shoot them down. Don't do this. So they have those files, and they have a couple of his telegrams, and then they have a couple other stuff. And they really didn't have anything. I thought, this is kind of weird. And so then I go, the Eisenhower Library is just down the road. It's maybe 2 hours down the road in Kansas. So I go there, and then I ask, you have to actually apply to research there. And I'm in the interview and I say, well, what have you got on UFOs? And they've got 5 documents. They've got 28 million pages of files and they got 5 UFO documents. I'm going, something's going on here. This can't be true. I mean, something's wrong here. There's got to be more documents. And that's where I got to the presidents. I start this search. What does the most powerful man in the world know about the most important subject?
We are with Grant Cameron tonight on Spaced Out Radio right now. His website, presidentialufo.com. We're going to hop out for a break here at the bottom of the hour. When we come back, we're going to get more into the presidents. Who knows? What do they know? Very important questions indeed for the expert of the night. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back right after this.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
Hi there. This is your medium, Joanna, from Spaced Out Weekend, 2 Mediums and a Large. I would love it if you would come and join us with host James Tyson every other Sunday on Spaced Out Weekend. Together, we will take your calls and your questions live. Our goal is to provide you with a positive outlook on deep questions that you may have. questions regarding love, relationships, money, or whatever else is on your mind. Come and check us out at spacedoutradio.com.
Every Saturday and Sunday night, as Dave Scott wanders aimlessly in the wilderness, you can come hang out with me, James Tyson, in Spaced Out Weekend. Starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, I'll take you along as we talk with some of the best experts in their fields. SpacedOutRadio.com is the place to find us. So sit down, relax, put your feet up. Enjoy the topics like the paranormal, supernatural, intuitiveness, and so much more. Hope to see you there.
Hey everybody, this is Patrick Webster Small, and I'm here to bring you the Webster Phenomena every Saturday night, live at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern. If you're looking for aliens and extraterrestrials, well, we've got them. Big and tall, short and small. You're bound to find what you're looking for. So join me on the Webster Phenomena right here on Spaced Out Radio.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. With their money-back guarantee and the many benefits, how can you afford not to get one? Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com for mind, body, and spirit, and expect a miracle.
Have you ever wondered about those weird and strange creatures people have reported throughout history? Do you wonder if those stories are real? Me too, and that's why I started Cryptopia.us. Hey, this is Rob Morphy, crypto historian. Join me once a month on Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott, where we will get into the odd and bizarre reports, from the Dover demon to hairy hominids and everything in between. I will break down what people like you and me are seeing at spacedoutradio.com.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost?
Look no further than Spaced Out Radio.
SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click on to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on radio
or our website, including social media.
From commercial spots to banners, we have it all.
Check out our competitive pricing today.
Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with UFOcop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
Want to connect with us online? Find us on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show, on Twitter, @Spaced Out Radio, on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR, on YouTube, Spaced Out Radio Show, and our website is spacedoutradio.com. All right, space travelers, here comes the second half hour of Spaced Out Radio. Welcome back to Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Thank you so much for listening in on the SHR Media Network, over on the Spaced Out Radio chat room on Spreaker, and on Facebook at Chronicles of the Unknown, Euphoria Chronicles, Forest Moon Paranormal, and our flagship, SOR Space Travelers. Good to have you along for the ride. Tomorrow night on the show, we're continuing the disclosure talk. Steve Bassett from the Paradigm Research Group, also part of the Alien Cosmic Expo this coming weekend in Brantford, Ontario, will be with us. It's going to be a great week indeed leading up. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can do so at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, I can be followed at Dave Scott, SOR. Follow us on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel, Spaced Out Radio Show, and our website, which will have a new look this week. It's only days away, is spacedoutradio.com. Tonight, from presidentialufos.com, it is Grant Cameron. He is one of the leading researchers of ufology, especially when it comes to U.S. presidents and what they know in the White House. Grant, welcome back.
Well, thanks for having me back. I'm enjoying the conversation.
You know what? the way I look at what you study between what is happening in the president's office and the Oval Office compared to what's happening with ufology, and you've been able to combine the two, it really is the Disneyland of ufology that you have taken to study, because there is so much information and hidden information out there that it's got to be fun for you, Grant. It has to be a good time.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's like since I had that first sighting, it's been everything to me. It's like, but you find that with a lot of people in the UFO field. It's almost like you get dragged down the rabbit hole, and it's pretty hard to get out. I remember there's been numerous times. I've been in this for 41 years, where someone will quit, and for years this happens. Oh, the guy quit. He's had it. You're never going to get an answer. Whatever. He's quitting. He's never going to do it again. And we always say, don't worry, he'll be back. Nobody quits. It's like you just sort of get dragged into it, and it is very, very exciting. There's the odd time where your wheels are spinning, you're not really getting anything. But since 2012, I've had a number of these sort of enlightenment type things where sort of everything is, the lights have come on, and then the lights came on again. And I'm thoroughly convinced that I now have the answer to that question I asked in May of 1975 is what's going on, like an answer. I want to know what this is all about, and I think I now am content. If I were to die tomorrow, I'm content with the answer the stuff that I've discovered. I'm no longer in a thing where you'll hear a lot of researchers say, oh, it's a big mystery. It's like cancer. It's a big mystery. We don't know what's going on. Send us money. We'll do research. And then the next year it's again, we don't know what's going on. We got some more sightings. We don't know what's going on. And I think I know what's going on. I mean, I may be wrong, but I'm quite content with what I've discovered. So it is the most interesting subject. There's no doubt about that. I've even told people, especially experiencers, people who have had either sightings or sort of the abduction experience, because I believe even people who have had UFO sightings are part of the game, because you got to look at it. Why do UFOs have lights on it? So you can see it. Because we don't have lights on our planes except for navigation lights, so why would UFO craft have lights on them? And they have some pretty bizarre. If you look at John Lennon's sighting in 1974, he had these big giant marquee light bulbs on this thing with a big red light on the top. And they say, well, why would you need marquee light bulbs, these huge bulbs like on the old theaters? Why would you need these lights on the side of a craft? You need that to go from planet to planet? No, this is just for show. They wanted him to remember this and describe it and stuff like that. And so I believe everybody's sort of who's been involved seeing stuff or had abduction experience are part of the game. And I think that everybody's playing this sort of a role, and that's why people can't really escape it, because they're sort of dragged into this.
I have a question from our SOR Space Travelers Room from Amanda, who lives in the Lower Mainland of British Columbia here. Okay. And she is asking, how much do you think, Grant, the Canadian government has covered up about UFOs?
That's a $64,000 question. They basically, this comes down to, I've just written this book on the Clintons, the Clinton UFO storybook. And that's what it comes down to, this thing. There's going to be a big argument, because I've now stated that everything on my website is basically wrong. My website is presidentialufo.com. And I've always maintained, I've gone along with what I now think is the cover story, that the president didn't know what was going on, the president's cut out of the loop, plausible deniability, and now I say, no, the president knows. There's no doubt about the president knows. And I detail in the book all the constitutional things that would have to happen and stuff like that. But when you're outside the president, then basically everybody can be outside, not read in. You don't need the defense intelligence guy. You don't need the CIA. You don't need the Canadian Prime Minister. You just need people in certain positions inside, say, the Canadian military. All you need is, say, 3 or 4 people inside the Canadian military who are providing the data that you need to know what's going on in Canada. The defense minister doesn't need to know. The prime minister doesn't need to know. And that's what I think is going on. I think there's this MJ12 group that's been confirmed by a number of different people that basically is running the show. And they're run out of the executive office of the president. If you look back to, if people are familiar with the MJ12 document that was leaked in the 1980s, you look on the very first page of the document, it said, this was established by a classified executive order by the President Truman. a classified executive order. There's only one person who can write an executive order, and that's the President of the United States. So the President of the United States starts this group called MJ-12, and they're responsible only to the President of the United States. So there's 12 people, there's 20 people. I don't know how many people are in it now. I don't know who's on the MJ-12 group, but they're directly in the executive office of the President. They report to the President. Outside of that, everybody could not know what's going on. And so when I look at the Canadian government, as I said, like after 1954, I really could not tell you what the heck the government knew. No, I have no idea. And Paul Hellyer will tell you, when he was in the Defense Department as the Minister of Defense, he would see the UFO reports, a couple of UFO reports. He didn't know what was going on either. And he was the head guy. And he said he was busy trying to put all the Canadian military together, like the Army, Air Force, and Navy, to a combined military. So he really wasn't interested in the subject. He only became interested in the subject when he read the Corso book. But you don't need these people. So the Canadian material is going, but I think it's basically the U.S. government that is running the show. They're in control of this thing. All the material is coming. And then you have other agencies or other governments, say like Chinese and the Russians, who the way it's played, if you're an adversary of the United States, then it comes down to this bluffing game, where everybody says, well, the Americans should just disclose what they've got and just put on the table. The thing is, the American government, I can guarantee you, does not have all the answers. It's like you and I. There's a bunch of stuff, because when you look at the UFO mystery, it is a million times more complex than you think it is. It's a million times less physical than you think it is. It is really, really complex. And I don't think they have the answer to all this kind of stuff. So what's happening is the Americans want the Russians to put their cards down. Show us what you got. Disclose. Show us what you got. And the Russians want the Americans to put their cards down. And the problem with not putting your cards down, the reason they don't put their cards down is, say the Americans put their cards down, and you put down the card that gives the Russians the 20% they don't have. They got 80% and they're missing 20, and you put your cards down. Then the Russians say, "Oh, we changed our mind. We're not going to disclose." Now the Russians have got 100% and we've only got 80. So everybody's playing the bluffing game. Everybody wants other people to put their cards down. And I'll give you an example of a story. There's a guy by the name of Scott Jones, who was one of the people who went in to brief Lawrence Rockefeller, or with Lawrence Rockefeller, to brief Bill Clinton's science advisor in 1993. Scott Jones was a Navy intelligence guy, and he had the most wonderful job in the world. He worked for Claiborne Pell, and Claiborne Pell was he was the top-ranking Democrat in the Senate, and he was the head of the Foreign Relations Committee. A very, very powerful guy, and he was into the weird stuff. He was into paranormal phenomena. He was into UFOs, but not as much as paranormal phenomena. So he hired Scott Jones to just provide him this material. That's all he did. He went to mediums. He went to parapsychology conferences. He went to UFO conferences. And then he would write reports of all the stuff he was discovering. And he would send this to give it to Claiborne Pell. That was his job. It was a beautiful job. He goes to Russia, and he told the story to me about being in Russia and trying to negotiate with the Russians for a piece of, they got a piece of alien tissue to get the DNA, the alien tissue, and it falls through. He's making this negotiation. And you got to remember with Russia and China, they're both communist governments. So it's not like a democracy. Everybody works for the government, and you just at whatever level in the government. So when Scott Jones goes over to talk to the Chinese, he tells the Chinese, he said, "I don't really work for the government." And they said, "You work for the government." No, he said, "No, I don't work for the government. I work for Claiborne Pell, who's a senator in the government." And they said, "No, you work for the government. No, don't tell me this. You work for the government. Everybody's responsible to the. They figure everybody's reporting to the president." So he said, no, that's not the way it works. So he said to the Chinese, he told me this story. He said to the Chinese, "Why don't you guys disclose? Why don't you make a disclosure and beat the Americans to the punch?" And the Chinese, and he's talking high level, very high level in the Chinese government, they said to him, "Let me tell you what, when the Americans disclose, we'll be a close second." And that's the old deal. It's like we want the Americans to put the cards down. Everybody has a piece of the puzzle. So what the Canadian government has, I have no idea. I know that the sighting stuff goes to Chris Rakowski, all the non-classified stuff, because the government officials, once it's been screened through, they don't really know what to do. RCMP files, the National Research Council files, Defense Department files, Department of Transport may file a few things, and it all goes to Chris Zurkowsky here in Winnipeg. That's why he has the big, sighting report every year, and he has like 1,000 sightings or whatever, because he's getting all the stuff from the Canadian government. They don't know what to do with it. They're sending it to Chris. And Chris, he used to tell me before, don't tell people they're sending me this stuff. And he was actually getting people giving him requests for FOIA material. And he said, well, what should I do? I said, I don't know, photocopy some stuff and send it to him. People were filing access to information requests for UFO documents from him because it was coming to him. So I don't think anybody really knows. There's probably, I don't know, maybe 12 people that know what's going on, and they're collecting the material, but they're not necessarily the top people in each agency. They're just people in the appropriate positions to provide the material for the Americans, and the Americans, I'm pretty sure, are running the show. So you'll get situations like, if you remember the Virginia crash, 1996, they go into Virginia, and the Brazilians say clearly that they're negotiating for the craft and the bodies. So they can put in pressure, provide military assistance, money, put a Brazilian on the space shuttle and stuff like that. And they're basically, in the free world, they're gathering up all the material and providing each government with stuff in exchange for the material. The Americans are running the show. I'm convinced of that.
I was talking to Victor Vigiani on this show back on the 2nd of this month, and I put a theory to him, and I'm curious to get your opinion on this, because he actually thought there was something to it, and it's my theory alone, Grant, and that is, when it comes to abductions, it seems like down across the border in the United States that extraterrestrials are thought of as very, very cruel creatures that have surgery and perform all sorts of experiments on people, whereas people who are having abduction and contact experiences up here seem to be a lot more civilized, a lot more spiritual. And my theory on this goes that Canada never made a deal with an extraterrestrial species like what is said to be believed between Eisenhower, which was humans for technology. Would you put any stock in that?
Okay, I talk about all those issues. The guy you should put on is Ray Hernandez. Are you familiar with the Edgar Mitchell free figures? I mean, what I say is going on is that it's like the Trump thing, or like Bernie Sanders. You become very popular when you preach fear. And the two guys that are putting out the majority of the evil alien stuff are David Jacobs and Bud Hopkins. And both of them are atheists. Both of them don't want any spiritual thing. So when it comes down, and I've talked to people in both camps. I've talked to a girl in Phoenix, Arizona, who was one of David Jacobs' main clients in one of his book. And when I heard that, because he's saying there's no spiritual aspect to this, it's all evil aliens and all this kind of stuff, and, the world's coming to an end, I fear for my kids and all this kind of stuff. I said to her, she was a chaplain, a hospice chaplain. I said, you were this person in the book, yeah? And I said, well, he's saying that it's all evil. She said, well, he's an atheist. He can say whatever he wants. He's not speaking on my behalf. He doesn't speak for me. And I talked to a girl who was with Bud Hopkins. And I've talked actually two people who were clients of Bud Hopkins, that when they got to the spiritual stuff, when they got to the good stuff, Bud Hopkins just said, well, maybe you should go to Leo Sprinkle. He might be a better fit for you. They just wouldn't handle those kind of cases. So if you look at the free survey, the Edgar Mitchell material, and you say, like David Jacobs is saying, they're all evil. It's all, it's all bad stuff. The world's coming to an end. I don't know what they're going to do, but it's going to happen very quickly. This is what he said in 1998 in the book, The Threat. So he said it's going to happen very quickly, and now it's like 20 years later. He's still sitting on top of a mountain waiting for the world to end. The aliens haven't eaten us yet or stolen all our gold or whatever they're supposed to be doing or whatever. And you get this, and he's saying it's 100%. And then you get the free survey, and they ask him, how many of you think it's evil? And you're actually talking to 2,500 experiencers, the people who are actually in the craft, the people who actually experienced it, and it's 9%. And I say, it's not zero, but it's getting pretty close to zero. Nobody believes it. So what's the disconnect? If the people who are experiencing it are saying only 9% are saying it's evil, and I will say that those 9% are people who haven't been regressed. Because I know categorically, I was very good friends with Chris Bledsoe, who is the guy that Warner Brothers is going to do an $80 million. They're going to throw $80 million at his case, and they're going to have Julia Roberts and all sorts of big names in this movie. It was going to do more. They're going to put more money than The Passion of the Christ. This would be the biggest movie of all times and stuff. His case, And he thought it was evil when it first happened to him. And that's what happens. When it first happens to you, you don't know what the heck's going on. And all you remember is this, this operation type stuff. And Chris had the regression. And once he had the regression, he suddenly started to open up and he started to realize what was going on. And he started getting flashbacks. Now the guy thinks he's saving the world. You can't shut him up. He thinks this is the greatest thing that ever happened. And he's a savior and it's completely changed. So you get these, it comes down to how much experience have you actually got? Have you actually gone through your case? Or are you just going on based on one little recollection that you have? So I'm one, and a lot of people disagree. I'm one that says there are no evil aliens. It comes down, and it's a long story about the oneness. The only way that you can get off this planet and go there, they're not flying through space. They're going from point to point in space. The way you go through point to point in space, when it was asked of Ben Rich, who runs Lockheed Skunk Works, who said we've got the technology to take ET home, Jan Hartsoon, who runs the MUFON, international director, fascinated because he had an experience at 9 years old, wanted to become an engineer to develop UFO propulsion, and said to him, Ben, how do they get here? How does it work? And Ben said, what do you know about ESP? And he said, oh, I don't know. It means everything in time and space is connected. And Ben said, that's how it works. It's this, everything is connected. Everything is one. So that's how they get here. They understand that everything is one. There's no separation. There's no good guys, bad guys. There's no all this kind of stuff. And if you understand that everything is connected, everything is one, we're all one, say one particle or one entity in space, then how can you kill people? And especially if you're an alien, and aliens are telepathic. We know this. We didn't know this years ago, but we now know that all aliens are telepathic. That's the difference between us and them. They can move from point to point in space, and they do it through telepathy, through ESP. It's this whole thing that's how telepathy works. You can go point to point. Everything is one. You just connect into the hologram or whatever. So you have this situation where the aliens understand this oneness concept, and if they're telepathic, if you and I are having a war, then if I know you were going to shoot and you know where I'm going to shoot, and we can both read the future and we both know who's going to win the war and who's going to lose the war, so why would you have a battle? The only way you could have a battle is if you can sneak up on the guy. So that doesn't make any sense. And then you talked about, and I've talked about this a number of times, is this whole idea, because we're into this good guys, evil guys type thing. The idea of Eisenhower, and I went to the Eisenhower library twice to look at this case. I went through all the files on this thing, and it's total nonsense. It's like we have this thing about the Greys. Well, number one, the Greys were not around in the 1950s. The Greys did not make an appearance. They did not make themselves known until the 1960s. So there was nobody talking about Greys. Wilbur Smith, who was the Canadian government program, his son said, his father described at the end of his life, he said, yes, they showed me the bodies, they showed me the craft. And I said to him, my first question to James Smith, the son, I said, James, were they Greys? He said, no, my father did not say they were Greys. They looked just like us, but they were smaller, that they could pass on the street. And Wilbur even said this himself. They could pass on the street. I would know who they are, but most people wouldn't know who they are. So the Greys didn't come in. And the whole thing with this Eisenhower thing, it doesn't make any sense, because if you're going to make a deal with the Greys for technology in exchange for abducting people, what are you going to do if they break the treaty? I mean, what are you going to take them to court? This is nuts. I mean, the Greys can do whatever they want. If they want to abduct people, they're going to abduct people. They're not going to ask for permission. The Greys don't talk to anybody. We know this. They really don't interact with human beings. They just do their little job. They got their little job to do. And the other thing is, if the Greys are giving us technology, advanced technology, why would they give us advanced technology which we're going to turn around and try to shoot them down with? This doesn't make any sense. What I say happened, and this comes down to the nuclear thing. What happened in my thing? It was the anti-ballistic missile unit in North Dakota that I think caused what happened in my town. Because as soon as they took the missiles out of North Dakota, starting in November of 1975, the UFOs went away and they never came back. I asked Bob Diemert, the guy who ran the airport in Carmen, Manitoba. I said, Bob, like 30 years later, I went back and said, Bob, why were they here? I could never figure out why they were here. He said, you know why they were here? I said, Bob, I don't know why they were here. Small town, no industry, whatever. He said, you know why they were here? I told you why they were here. I said, Bob, it's been 30 years. I have no idea why they were here. He said, the missiles. I told you. They were coming from the United States. It was because of the missiles in the United States. And I went, oh, and suddenly it made sense. So it has to do with nuclear weapons. That's the 54 story. And I lecture about this, and I show the video. I said, if you want to know what happened in 1954, if Eisenhower did meet with beings, it was not Greys. The original story that broke a couple weeks after in California by the UFO people at that time was that they were human-type aliens that he met with, and that they levitated stuff and they did all this sort of stuff. And Eisenhower said, the people can't take this. We're shutting this down. So he may have met with beings. And what the message is always the same. There's this environmental message. You see the screen. The people on board the ship, everybody sees the screen. They see the screen with the environmental damage, and the other thing they're told about is nuclear weapons. In the 50s, that was the main message. Wilbur Smith was talking about this ad nauseum about the nuclear weapons. We've got to stop the nuclear weapons. The first contactees, Adamski and Williamson, appeared about 9 days after the detonation of the hydrogen bomb in 1952. Before that, nobody was talking to aliens. So you got this nuclear weapon connection, and in 1954, if you want to know what happened, what you do is take a look at 1 week after that supposed meeting, which took place on February the 20th, 1954. On a Saturday night, Eisenhower did disappear. It was the afternoon. He didn't reappear till the next morning in church. And then the newspaper reporters had figured out that the president was gone, and the press secretary had to come in, calm the reporters down. If you want to know what happened, a week later was the first test of Castle Bravo. The Americans were testing nuclear hydrogen bomb that you could drop out of a plane. They detonated it on this island. And they thought that deuterium-7 was neutral, and it wasn't neutral. They miscalculated the bomb. They thought it was going to be 5 megatons. It turned out it was 15 megatons. It was on the ground. It is the dirtiest nuclear test that's ever been done. Even the Russians did a 50 megaton, but they did it high up in the atmosphere. This one had way more detonation power in terms of killing stuff. What happened is they detonated the thing. Suddenly, the guys that detonated 20 miles away suddenly realized like something's wrong. The radiation counts are going up at 20 miles away, and they radio, get us out of here, get us out. They had no radiation stuff. They had to move them. It turned out it was 15 megatons. They contaminated a Japanese fishing trawler. 15 people on that trawler died. The Japanese today are still protesting that detonation in 1954, a week after that meeting with Eisenhower. And the wind was going in the wrong direction, and they contaminated an island. Completely contaminated an island. And then they went, and this is the key, they went in there, the American troops went in there, and they saw the radioactive fallout was falling on this island, and they left the people there for 48 hours, and they ran it as a test. They said, let's see how the savages react to radioactive fallout. They ran a test on these people. They just left them there to see what would happen, and they took them off after 48 hours. 90% of the people on that island got thyroid cancer. Those people are still off the island. The Americans have paid $1 billion in reparations and just contaminated that whole part of the Pacific. And if Eisenhower did meet with aliens, I say it had to do with the nuclear weapons, and they said, do not do any more nuclear tests. And Eisenhower said, we'll do whatever the damn well we please. And they ran the test, and they were getting a warning not to run the test. That's what I say makes more sense than Gray's giving us technology, which we can't do anything to stop them. So that's my opinion on the 54 thing with Eisenhower.
Grant Cameron is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. His website, presidentialufo.com. Highly suggest that you check it out. Grant will be participating this coming weekend at the Alien Cosmic Expo in Brantford, Ontario. If you're on the East Coast, that's the place to be for this weekend if you need to learn more. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back after this break.
Greetings and salutations, space travelers, from the Chronicles of the Unknown team.
What is Chronicles of the Unknown? I keep hearing about this thing.
It's a new paranormal reality TV show based right here in beautiful British Columbia, Canada. Follow our team as we uncover claims of activity on the Caribou Gold Rush Trail. You can also follow us here every third Monday, where 2 members of our team will be available to answer your questions. We'll give you some equipment updates and some of our experiences on the road, right here on Spaced Out Radio on the Spreaker.com network.
you believe you've been in contact with extraterrestrials? Have you seen the Greys, the Mantis, or the Reptilians? I am Samantha Mullet, and on the second Tuesday of each month, you can listen and learn from my experiences with off-worlders on Spaced Out Radio's The ET Experience. With host Dave Scott, we'll sit down and chat about what's going on with our friends from other worlds. We'll also try to answer your questions, so please tune in on the second Tuesday of the month, only on Spaced Out Radio.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Did you know that Spaced Out Radio runs 7 days a week? Hi, it's James Tyson from Spaced Out Weekend. Every Saturday and Sunday night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, you can join me and my guests for some great chatter about what's going on out in the universe, or even in that dark part of the basement you really don't want to go back into. Well, let's find the answers to your experiences together. So come on up to Uncle Jimbo's cabin on the weekend. For more information, look us up at spacedoutradio.com.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Attention Spaced Out Radio listeners. For only $5 a month, you can join Spaced Out Radio Space Travelers. Your membership at spacedoutradio.com will give you access to private fan area on the website, get you a monthly newsletter, draws for monthly swag, and a whole lot more. Sign up today to become a part of the Spaced Out Radio experience.
Right here, this is where we divulge the fruit of our research. Here on the Webster Phenomena every Saturday night at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern on Spaced Out Radio. And we give it up to you guys, all the listeners, and the live listeners usually get something special and hang out in the chat room. And we love to have you. So we'll see you every Saturday night at 8 p.m. You know where.
If you're a fan of social media, you can follow Spaced Out Radio on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can also follow us on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. Our YouTube channel, where our archives are stored, is Spaced Out Radio Show. And of course, our website is spacedoutradio.com. Welcome back to hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio tonight. Thanks so much if you're tuning in on the SHR Media Network. Packed house in the Spaced Out Radio chat room on Spreaker, same as in our flagship SOR Space Travelers, as well as those following along on Euphoria Chronicles, Chronicles of the Unknown, and Forest Moon Paranormal. Glad to have you all with us tonight. Tomorrow night on the show, we stick with ET Disclosure. Stephen Bassett from the Paradigm Research Group will be here as we continue on with our series for the Alien Cosmic Expo in Brantford, Ontario, this weekend, the 24th through the 26th. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, I can be followed at Dave Scott SOR. Our YouTube channel is Spaced Out Radio Show, and our website, which will have a new look this week, is spacedoutradio.com. Tonight we are talking with Grant Cameron. He is an expert. His website at presidentialufo.com. Grant, thank you for being with us.
Yes, thank you.
I want to start off with a question from our audience, and this comes from Nick in the Spaced Out Radio chat room on Spreaker. And he is asking, one of the new faces of ufology all of a sudden is Blink-182 singer Tom DeLonge. He's apparently doing this giant documentary that involves members of the U.S. government. What do you think about his research and getting into it so quick?
I think he's being, let's get the right word, managed. He's not being used, but he's being managed. The expression is, those who speak do not know. and those who know do not speak. He has no clearance. He has no authority to have any classified material. If you know with the Hillary Clinton thing, she's got the email thing, and this is not disclosing highly classified material. This is just inappropriate handling of classified material. The FBI director has stated there are 147 agents working on her case. She could go to jail for life. I mean, this is very serious stuff when people come and say, okay, I've got the most highly classified secret in the United States, and I'm going to tell you what's going on. It's classified for a reason, and you can't give it to people who aren't authorized. And DeLong may be a nice guy, he may be a very powerful musician or whatever, but he doesn't have a clearance. So he's being manipulated or managed. I would say managed instead. And John Podesta is one of the people that is talking to him. And I know John Podesta has an agenda. He's a very smart guy. He would never break the law. I mean, he's trying to get Hillary out of the slam she's in with the FBI right now. He's a lawyer. He knows the law. He's not going to leak classified material. So what happens, the way they do it, is you take the real material, you change the document, change a couple of words in the document, you give the people material, but you're not giving them the actual truth. And what you want to do is you want to put out, as I said, the sort of what's going on without giving classified material, because classified material, everybody's going to jail. You can't walk in there. And so DeLong is saying, almost like Bill Moore did and Stephen Greer did, is you get guys who have very high egos, and they believe that they're the only guys that know what's going on, that everybody's, that it bows down to them, that the government is listening to them, whatever. And they're easy to set up. So you come to DeLong and you say, okay, he has this plan to get this to the young kids, whatever, and that they may go along with that. So they figure, but you can't give them classified material. So what you do is you give them material, and part of it's true and part of it's not true. And I can give you, for example, the one thing he says is absolutely not true. I can guarantee it's not true. He says, okay, these guys show him these different facilities, and he gets there, and the kids are coming, they have parties and stuff, and, the families are there and all this kind of stuff, and he knows what's going on. And he says, but there's no coordination in the UFO program. That there's all these little programs, and everybody's doing their own thing. That is absolutely not happening. There's no way the U.S. military works that way. That it's like you get $1 million and go and see what you can do about UFOs, and then John over there will give him $1 million and you can go see what he can do. I can guarantee you this is highly coordinated, because you got a lot of security around it, and you want this carefully controlled. There's no way you got all these little groups that are just sort of doing their own thing and nobody's overseeing it. I can guarantee it's being overseen by MJ-12 or some very highly compartmentalized thing, because this is the biggest secret you got. This is the most highly the technology, the energy behind the UFO phenomena is going to make nuclear weapons look like matchsticks. This is terribly, terribly powerful stuff, and there's no way it's going to be run by some little guys and everybody's doing their own thing. So they're using him to get out a message. And he believes it's true. He believes all these guys are his friend, and that they're giving him classified material. That immediately says, big red flag. All these people are handing him classified material. And that's where I got into this thing where I suddenly changed the opinion that the president knows. So it's like Stephen Greer used to be running around saying, I'm trying to tell the president doesn't know what's going on, and all these people are coming to me. And it's like, are you serious? Like, I mean, all the people are coming to you, but they're not going to the president. The president doesn't know, and that somebody in the public knows what the president doesn't know. This isn't making sense at all. So that's what I think about the DeLong thing. He's doing the best he can, and they're using him, but he's not getting straight classified material.
So, Grant, do you think he's a shill then for what the government is doing?
Well, that's where I'm trying to use the right word. I'm saying managed, that they want the message out. Like I was told by some two people who are UFO people, they're not government people, and then one government person who's connected to them telling me, they showed me the connection to Barack Obama. And there was no doubt they had a connection to Barack Obama. And I'm going, wow. So I listened very carefully, and that's when they said the government wants it out, but they don't want their fingerprints on it. So you go through these weird things, these little plans that they have where they're leaking stuff without them doing it. And it's kind of weird. Like I said, well, how do you get leak this stuff without the government's fingerprints, because that's what they told me. Well, they don't want the government's fingerprints on it. So, well, how do you do that? I mean, it's going to have the government's fingerprints on it once you leak this thing. So they're using these people to get the word out as to what's going on. Because majority of the things, as I said, like in Canada, you ask me, what's going on in Canada? I say, I have absolutely no idea. I have not even the foggiest notion since 1954. I have no idea what they're doing. In the United States, we know exactly what they're doing. For example, there was a documentary in 1988, which I tell people, it's on YouTube. You can look it up. It's called UFO Cover-Up Live. And if you look at this was a government operation. This was a couple days before the election in 2000, when Reagan left office. So I say this was green-lighted by Reagan. And it gives a bunch of stuff. It gives, for example, this October of 1988, if you look at this documentary, it shows a flow chart. And on the flow chart, it shows MJ-12 under the president, right in the president's office. That's the way it works. And NSA goes into MJ-12, and all the other agencies are going up and through MJ-12 and into the president. And on that flow chart, they also show Area 51. Well, Area 51, George Knapp would not interview Bob Lazar until 6 months later. Bob Lazar would not even go on to the Area 51 site until December of that year. And already in October, on this flowchart, it shows Area 51 as being a key place where the UFOs. There was nobody knew in October 1988 that there was UFOs at Area 51. That was leaked by the government. So the government leaks the Bob Lazar story. They put Bob Lazar on the Area 51 base. They show him all this stuff. They know he's got a bad background. They know he's talking to John Lear, because they asked him in one of the interviews when he went to get the job, what's your association with John Lear and what do you think about him? So they knew he was dealing with John Lear, who was like, real big name in the UFO field. They knew he was going to leak the stuff to John Lear, so they give him this material. And then when it all falls apart, they figure, okay, what's going to happen is they're going to say, oh, John Lear's putting that stuff out. John Lear's crazy. He talks about souls going into the moon, and John Lear's just a wacko guy. Don't listen to that stuff. And so the story of Area 51 gets out, but nobody believes it because John Lear's telling the story. That's how they do it. But what happened with Area 51 was that they did this interview with Bob Lazar, and the thing went viral around the world, and suddenly you had TV networks from around the world coming, and people going up with buses up into the mountains to look down over the base, and it all fell apart. I mean, it was like it got out of control, and then they had to try to get it back under control. But in most cases, they'll leak the stuff, and the story gets out, and it just sort of dies. And there's lots of examples of this happening.
I find that very interesting that you would go that way and say that, basically, point blank, he is a shill, because you hear someone like Jordan Maxwell who says that when you get into that upper echelon, these people want to tell you information. You don't know why, but they just feel like it's their need to fill you in.
Okay, but then the question is, and I do this with all the guys, I say, I've never had a whistleblower come to me. If somebody were a whistleblower to come to me and say, okay, I'm going to tell you this, I would say, are you a patriotic American? Yeah. Okay, and you swore to uphold the Constitution and the law. That's one of the oaths they take. Are you going to uphold the law and the Constitution? Yeah. And you swore that you would keep this secret? Yeah. And so you lied to the U.S. government, you violated your security oath, and now you're telling me you're going to tell me the truth? I should trust you? I mean, as I said, Hillary Clinton, she's not leaking material. She's just inappropriate handling of classified material. She could spend the rest of her life in jail. So if somebody's coming and they're telling you classified material, you got to wonder, number one, why is this person not in jail? How did they get to walk around? And Hillary Clinton is under a major investigation by 147 agents from the FBI. They take this stuff very seriously, especially when it's UFO stuff, which is a waived, unacknowledged special access program, the most highly classified subject. The Americans told the Canadians it's the most highly classified subject in the United States. You're not going to have people walking around telling the most highly classified secret in the United States. If someone is saying, I've got a security clearance higher than the president. Number one, the president doesn't have a security clearance. They're lying. They're lying through their teeth. Or how would you know who's cleared? How would you know? Only the person who's running the program knows who's cleared. So these people running around are, to me, most of them are real bad news. And I'll give you an example. You had the Disclosure News Conference, where this CIA guy comes on. And Richard Dolan's brought this up, and I haven't really argued with him about it. And the guy comes out, and everybody's, gaga over this guy. He's like, he's a CIA guy, and Eisenhower's going to go to Area 51, and he's going to take over Area 51 if he doesn't get what he wanted. And this guy was dealing with Eisenhower, and it's like, I'm listening to this story, and it's like, wow, but he's dead wrong from the word go, because I worked with government documents my whole life. And he said, Richard asked him, he says, well, why are you talking? And he said, well, he said it was 1958, and he said after 40 years I can talk, and after 50 years, which is 2010, I can talk. And I'm going, is 1958 to 2010 is 52 years. You can't add number one. And I know for a fact, absolute fact, there is no 40-year rule. That's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. And there is no 50-year rule. Because how would you know? Like if you had the Roswell crash and you're in charge of the Roswell crash, you say, okay, you're under a 40-year rule. After 40 years, you can start talking about it. There is no such rule, because stuff that's classified is classified until it is no longer a threat to national security. That's why the atomic bomb is still classified. You cannot get the plans for the atomic bomb or the hydrogen bomb. That stuff's all over 50 years. Roswell is still classified. You know what's going on with Roswell? Everybody's still under security because it's still of national security. So anybody who's walking around saying that they've got the answer and they've got all this highly compartmentalized top secret material and they're walking around telling people without going to jail, I got a big problem with whistleblowers. Big problem, especially when I've never had a whistleblower come to me. To me, it's always a big problem why these people would be talking. It makes more sense that they're talking and they've been given authorization to talk. Let me give you an example, prime example. And this one fell through the cracks. And I tried to get the reporters to follow this one. This was the story of Chase Brandon. On the 50th anniversary of the Roswell crash, Corso came out, the Corso book. And, of course, he brings it out. And then on the 65th anniversary, surprise, surprise, it happens again. This time it's Chase Brandon. Chase Brandon is the second highest official inside the CIA to speak publicly on behalf of the CIA, because he was the Hollywood, the liaison to Hollywood. So he could go in and negotiate with agents, with people, offer them CIA assets and stuff like that in exchange for the movie portraying the CIA in a good light. So he had this very high position. His office was directly outside the CIA director's office. Second most powerful guy to speak on public on behalf of the CIA. He goes on coast to coast and he says, I can tell you for a fact that Roswell was an extraterrestrial spacecraft and it crashed in Roswell and there was cadavers. And he goes on coast to coast. And the book, he says clearly, I talked to the guy that interviewed him, and he told me two different times. He said one time, he said, Chase Brandon said it was reviewed twice by the CIA. So the CIA looks at the book, and you say you want to tell your story. You're a CIA agent, you want to tell your story. So the CIA, this is the way to do it. They say, okay, Dave, you can tell your story, but here's how it works. You got to change the name of where you were. You got to change the name of all the people. You got to take all the classified. So the CIA, if you're a CIA agent, you cannot release a book unless it goes to the CIA. The book was reviewed at least twice, and at one time, Chase Brandon said the book was reviewed 8 times by the CIA. The book's called The Christos Conundrum, and it is the fictional account of how the CIA dealt with the Roswell crash. So this book is the CIA putting this book out. The CIA controlled it, changed this, changed that, changed all this, and he writes the book, and he comes out on coast to coast, and he says, I can tell you, he makes up this story, I saw these files at Langley, and I can tell you Roswell was for real. Now, this is a high-ranking CIA guy. So, of course, it makes a big splash. Huffington Post does the thing. They get 7 million hits the first day on this thing. So I'm talking to the reporter at the Huffington Post, and I said, okay, well, we need to know, did the CIA talk to him after the story broke, after you got the 7 million hits? What did they look for the documents, all this kind of stuff? He said, I'm meeting with him on Sunday, but he's off the record. I'm not going to put him on the record. We're just going to have a couple of beers. I said, are you serious? You're going to let this guy talk to you off the record? I mean, there's a bunch of stuff. We actually there's 4 of us signed a letter to the CIA demanding that they explain this high-level guy coming out and saying that Roswell was real. And they came out and said, we can't find the documents that he's talking about. They actually responded to our request. And now they have not talked about it. Huffington Post dropped off the story, and nobody has ever talked to Chase Brandon since. So this story came out. Chase Brandon told the story about Roswell being real, put this fictional book out, the same as DeLong is doing, put it out. It's half true, half false. CIA's controlled it. They've written the book, and no, it just falls through the cracks, and everybody goes off to, like, what's the latest sighting? Have you seen any good UFO videos, lady? The UFO community is like totally out to lunch most of the times. They get a story, someone says, it's a hoax, and then it goes, okay, hoax. What's it? And then they run off to the next story. Nobody ever spends enough time when these important things are happening. And so the government is able to leak all this stuff. Like during the Barack Obama administration, I say he did a lot of things. For example, The CIA said, we have not been involved with UFOs since 1952, Robertson panel. We determined there was no cover-up, and it's all garbage, whatever. We're not involved with UFOs. Suddenly, last year, the CIA puts 2 UFO articles on their website, on the front page of their CIA website, and they're straight-up articles. How to investigate a flying saucer sighting, and this is when the X-Files thing was coming up, and nobody does anything. They just let this go, and why are they're not involved, and suddenly they're putting it, and they're tweeting it on their tweet page. They're tweeting these UFO articles, and you could go like, this is very obvious that they're just raising consciousness. They're running all these kind of things, and they do it over and over again, and the UFO community will run it for a couple of days, and then they just go on to the next story, and the story gets out, but nobody ever brings the CIA to account for what they're doing.
You could say, though, that the media is at fault for that because they did the exact same thing with John Podesta. I mean, it's only been the last couple of months where they've actually taken this whole UFO Hillary thing seriously.
Yeah, but then again, as you know, in the last month, May the 10th, the New York Times put out the big story about Hillary. And that's when it broke. When the New York Times did the story, it was like everybody suddenly paid attention. It's like, whoa! And then suddenly these reporters in the White House, if you followed these stories, there's 3 questions. There has not been a question in the White House news conference since 1997. And that was when Webster Hubbell came out with his book, Friends in High Places, and talked about the fact that Bill had sent him out to look for the answer to UFOs and that he couldn't find anything. And so he puts the book out. And before that, the White House has not answered a UFO question since January of 1954 when Eisenhower was asked about UFOs. And he walked around it by saying, well, I've got an Air Force friend of mine who said there's nothing to it. He didn't answer the question. So here you have suddenly reporters asking questions, and they're not asking the little green men questions. They're asking serious questions, like, is Barack Obama going to beat the president to the Hillary Clinton to the punch? Is she going to disclose before Hillary Clinton does? And they suddenly have realized that there's a story to this, and yet what happens is the press secretary, this Ernest guy, basically says, well, I don't have a tab in my briefing book for that, and I can't answer it. And then he rats the president out. He said, oh, the president has indicated, when they're asking the Area 51 question, he says, oh, the president has indicated that his job as president gives him access to this kind of material. You should ask him. It'll be interesting. I couldn't believe it. It'll be interesting. Like squeals on the president. Ask the president. It'll be interesting what he's going to say. And then the woman asked him, if you watched the one on the 16th, the one woman, and there's 3 reporters, again, who suddenly have got wind of the fact that, and that's what's happened. The media never believed it was for real. They never believed that there was a story to this. And suddenly you see these 3 reporters. Well, one was from ABC, and they're high reporters in the White House press corps. So this African-American reporter, I can't remember what her agency is, she says to him, okay, what's the deal with Roswell? Is this national security? And then she stops and she says, look, you're doing the dance. You're at the podium there. Look, you're doing the dance. You're getting a drink of water. You're trying to figure out what you're going to say. And this guy doesn't, like, she's attacking this guy. And she said, what's the deal? I mean, is this national security, whatever? And he said, well, I don't have a clearance. I don't know. This is something that I'm a press secretary. I don't have the answer to this. And then she says to him, I couldn't believe it. She says, you're not going to get away with this. And he said, you just keep trying. And it's like the attitude has completely changed, where suddenly the White House is saying, you're not going to get away with this. We're getting to the bottom of this. And that's what you need, is you need the Washington Post and the New York Times to suddenly realize they've been had. And there's a story to this. And that's why I say the most important part of the whole thing is that people have to realize, I've changed my whole opinion after 30 years of doing UFO stories on the president. I've now suddenly decided the president knows what's going on. I've been wrong for 30 years. The president knows. And once these reporters realize the president has been briefed, the cover-up is over. I guarantee you, the cover-up is over in hours. Because everybody thinks there's a cabal. Everybody thinks the Wizard of Oz is running the cover-up. And you can't, Dave, you can't go and interview the Wizard of Oz. So everybody says, oh, there's a cover-up running the thing. And that's the plausible deniability for the president. I can absolutely assure you the president knows he's the wizard behind the curtain. And the reason they have to make it look like the president doesn't know is because if they realize the president has been briefed, then they're going to ask the president. I know the president's phone number. I can give you the president's phone number. Everybody knows the president's phone number. Everybody knows where the president lives. Everybody knows how to get a hold of the president. And you suddenly going to have 2,000 reporters asking the president what's going on. They have to pretend the president doesn't know because he's the guy running the cover-up.
I never thought about it that way. I always thought that the president had top secret clearance to one portion and there was something above him that he just couldn't get to, Grant. And we only got about 2 minutes before we got to take our final break with you tonight. But I guess what I'm asking then in return, how much fault should the media take for not doing their job properly?
Well, you got to remember the media, especially now, is a 24/7 thing. Where I've talked to a lot of reporters, and basically it's like they do an interview with you, and tomorrow they got to do another interview. Their editor is going to tell them, okay, now tomorrow you're going to do the courthouse or the killing or whatever. And it's a 24-hour. They haven't got time to research. They haven't got time to do this kind of stuff. The only way you're going to get it is if they suddenly realize the president's been briefed and that you need someone like the Washington Post who did this big thing on top secret material, and they put on like 8 reporters or 5 reporters or whatever for 2 years. That's what you need. And that may be happening behind the scenes where they're going to all their sources or whatever. And the only thing that fell apart again is because President Obama was in Asia. He was in Japan when this thing broke out in the White House press thing. And I'm putting the feet to the fire of these reporters. I know who they are. And I'm on their tweet accounts. And like one was with President Obama a couple days ago when he was in Roswell. And I said, are you going to ask him about Hillary and the disclosure? And it was on his tweet site and he pulled it off. He didn't say anything. But that's what you need is one of the reporters to ask the president, Mr. President, have you been briefed on the subject of UFOs? If so, when was it and what were you told? And if Barack Obama hesitates or says, yes, I was briefed, it's over, baby, because the president isn't briefed on nonsense. If they suddenly realize the president's been briefed. So you can't really blame the reporters. They're running on a pile of different stories, and they really haven't got the time, and it's never really been taken seriously. That's changed in the last month. The attitude has completely changed.
Grant Cameron is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. His website, presidentialufo.com. He will be speaking this weekend at the Alien Cosmic Expo in Brantford, Ontario. That runs Friday through Sunday this week. Check it out if you are on the East Coast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back after this break.
Have you ever had an extraterrestrial experience? One you just couldn't explain? Well, maybe I can help. Hello. I am Samantha Mullet. On the second Tuesday of each month, I will join Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio to bring a human aspect to ET contact. It's something I've lived with my entire life, and I'd love to help you understand. Let's share our experiences. The ET Experience, the second Tuesday of each month, only on Spaced Out Radio.
Fairies? Bigfoot? Dogmen? Trolls? Goblins? Hey, if it's cryptid in any way, I'm looking into it. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, also known as Spaced Out Radio's Crypto Guru. Join me every second Wednesday of the month on Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott, where we will talk about the stories people call tall tales. I will fill you in on the latest sightings and the hidden histories that are causing quite a stir. You can find everything at spacedoutradio.com.
Hi there, this is Jolene with Rivulet Reiki and Readings, and I want you to relax. Let me help you chill out and get in touch with your body, mind, and soul. In this busy world, sometimes we need to let go, and this is where I can help. Visit my website, rivuletrndr.wix.com/rivuletrndr, or my Facebook page, Rivulet R&R, to set up an appointment for relaxation, Reiki, or readings, no matter where you are. It's time for you to make time for you.
Would you like to expand your clientele? Have you ever thought of online radio advertising? Check out spacedoutradio.com to get your name out there. Our listeners support those who advertise with us, so why not give it a try? We have the most competitive advertising prices out there. Just click on the advertising tab on spacedoutradio.com and contact us today.
Are you an ET experiencer, but you just don't know what's going on? Are you too timid or shy to discuss it with anyone? Maybe I can help. Join me, R. Keith Andrews, the first Friday of every month on Spaced Out Radio, and I will help you to find the answers you're looking for. Together, I will help you understand the off-worlders, and the true meanings behind your experiences. All you have to do is join us in the Spaced Out Radio chat room. See you there.
Every Saturday and Sunday night, as Dave Scott wanders aimlessly in the wilderness. You can come hang out with me, James Tyson, in Spaced Out Weekend. Starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, I'll take you along as we talk with some of the best experts in their fields. SpacedOutRadio.com is the place to find us. So sit down, relax, put your feet up. Enjoy the topics like the paranormal, supernatural, intuitiveness, and so much more. Hope to see you there.
Hi there, this is your psychic medium Joanna, and I would love it if you would join us every other Sunday on Spaced Out Weekend. With host James Tyson, we'll bring you personal psychic messages on two mediums and a large. Questions about love, life, career changes. We would love it if you would come and join us live. Call in and listen in for the experience. Allow us to open the doors to your other side. Two mediums and a large, heard only on Spaced Out Weekend at spacedoutradio.com.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
Do you have a topic or a guest that you'd like to hear on Spaced Out Radio? Let us know at spacedoutradio.com, where you can sign up to become a Space Traveler member today. Or you can find us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on our Facebook page, Spaced Out Radio Show. Welcome back to Space Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Good to have you with us if you're listening in on the SHR Media Network, on the Space Out Radio chat room, on Spreaker, and on Facebook. At Chronicles of the Unknown, Euphoria Chronicles, Forest Moon Paranormal, and our flagship SOR Space Travelers. A reminder to you all, you can follow Spaced Out Radio on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, I can be followed at Dave Scott SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show, and of course our website will have a brand new look coming up very soon at spacedoutradio.com. For the final half hour here, Grant Cameron will join us before in hour number 3, Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal will hop on in, where we will debate the show tonight. It'll be a lot of fun. Grant's website is presidentialufo.com. He is taking part in the Alien Cosmic Expo this weekend in Brantford, Ontario, and he is one of the major keynote speakers on this conference and the panel. It's going to be a great time. If you're on the East Coast, even if you're in the United States, head north. This is the show you want to catch. Grant, thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate you taking out the time.
You know, I really appreciate it. As I said, it helps me too to think things through as I'm talking.
I have a couple questions from the Spaced Out Radio chat room on Spreaker. This one comes from Eric. He asks, Grant, do you think that the ETs are going to disclose soon with or without government approval, thereby forcing their hands on disclosure?
Well, I think they're disclosing indirectly. I think they're doing the same thing. That's where I think the government is doing the disclosure thing, like an indirect disclosure. I think the aliens are doing the same thing. Scott Jones, who was the guy who went into President Clinton's science advisor's office with Rockefeller to brief, told me that he's in contact with the aliens, that he has this, well, I guess like a telepathic contact. They're getting message, he and one other person, and the aliens have said it's got to be done slowly. And I can see that, where one of the problems that I wrote an article on my website, presidentialufo.com, where I talk about the reasons the government has decided not to tell you the truth. And there's a number of things that might go wrong, like this melting of the stock market melting down, stuff like that. So you have this thing where if you get it out gradually, you're going to be in better shape. If everybody suddenly learns that everything they've believed is totally wrong, you don't need 100% of people to panic. You only need like 2%. You need 2% of people who have a lot of shares in oil to start selling, and then the next guy starts selling, and everybody starts heading for the door. And it's pretty hard to turn it around, because how do you convince people you've got it back under control to open the stock market? So there's a lot of things that that could go wrong.
Bill has a question in the Space Out Radio chat room on Spreaker. He's asking the experience of being denied access to USA conference in Los Angeles. Here in Vancouver, it has been blocked by U.S. Homeland Security. Have you heard about this?
Well, I was denied access, yes, to the United States. That happened in Vancouver. I was going to lecture in Los Angeles. Actually, it was funny. The lecture I was going to give was the 64 reasons the government has decided not to tell you the truth. And so I was coming through Vancouver, and I was getting $150 honorarium. So now when I'm in the States, I don't accept honorariums. I just go down there. It's not worth $150 because I had to eat the ticket. I mean, it cost me $600 for the ticket, and I had to pay for the ticket. And all they do is turn me around and send me home because I told them I was getting a $150 honorarium. And that's when the guy said to me, well, you're stealing American jobs. I said, for $150 and you need like 20 years experience to give a lecture like this. I mean, there's nobody with this ability to give this lecture. And then I said, professors go across all the time in the United States to give, a lecture at a university on a certain subject, wherever. He said, you're not a professor, don't even go there. And then he disappeared, and he came back with this. I've got it actually hanging on the wall right in front of me here. And it was from Homeland Security, and it said you've been denied access to the United States of America you don't have a green card, and yada, yada. And so he hands me this thing, and then he turns around, and he starts laughing, and he's talking to this guy behind him. And I waited, and then I looked at him, and I said, well, so what do I do now? He said, I don't care. Go back where you came from. And I went, wow. I couldn't. I just think he had a bad day. A lot of people made a big thing about, they had me identified and stuff. So now when I go across the border, I do it different. I don't accept any honorarium, so I don't have to worry. And people will say, well, just go across and say you're going on holidays. And I say, if I go to the border and I lie and I say I'm going on holidays, why should you believe anything when I come there to tell you what's going on in the UFO field? So I don't lie. I go there, and I start immediately. The guy says, what's your business or pleasure? And I say, pleasure. What are you doing? And I always say, I'm going to a flying saucer conference. And then most of the time, they just push my passport back. It's like they don't want to deal with this. I figure, you want to play the game? Let's play the game. And I had a bad 2 years. I was warned. Somebody gave me, it was some anonymous thing where they said you're going to have you'd be called. I was hauled in this one-way glass room so many times. It's not even funny. And my car gone through and stuff. I had a real bad time. And after 2 years, it just sort of ended. And so I don't do as much traveling as I did in the States. But, yeah, I was refused access going through Vancouver and ended up phoning the girlfriend and saying, can you pick me up? I'm coming home. And she said, you just left. And I said, yeah, I got refused entry. And so I went to Vancouver, had a $10 breakfast, and I flew back to Winnipeg.
Wow. They're a little serious about that.
Yeah, that's the thing with customs is they have no sense of humor. And you can't make a joke. You just sort of, they're playing their game. They're doing their thing. You got to let them do their thing. And, they figure they're saving the world. That's part of the whole thing that I talk about a lot when I lecture is when I get into the good and bad thing. Everybody thinks they're saving the world. There really is nobody thinks he's an evil guy. Everybody thinks they're saving the world. And the guy thought he was saving the world, and fine. I just learned from my mistake, and I know how to avoid it next time when I go across.
Question from Trip in the Space Out Radio chat room on Spreaker. Will President Carter ever be questioned about ETs?
President Carter? I got a good story about that. Are we talking the old presidents, or are we talking Obama?
Well, let's talk about President Carter right now, because that's his question.
This is one of the things where I talk about the fact that the president knows. And I talk about the constitutionality of this. I give 5 reasons. And let me just give you one very specific reason. All security, if you look at all the security, top secret, restricted, secret, all the compartments, it's all done not by law. Everybody thinks it's done by law. It is not done by law. It's all done by executive order. The first executive order was 8381, March of 1940 by Roosevelt. The president runs security. This is what people don't realize. The president, all the classifications are by the president, all the secret documents, it's all controlled out of the executive office of the president. It's not run by Congress. It's not run by law. It's run out of the executive office of the president. The president's running all the security on everything, on all the black budget programs. He's the top guy. So the president can't, the word is the president can't be a player. There was a story, Scott Jones, as I said, was the guy who went to brief Clinton's press science advisor. He and John Alexander, who's famous for being the UFO guy, who's kind of skeptical, and who was the head of non-lethal weapons for the U.S. military. both of them were working together on UFOs, trying to figure out what was going on. And they get because Scott Jones had worked for Claiborne Pell, who was you got to remember, he's the ranking Democrat in the Senate at the time. So he writes a letter. They said, we'd like to talk about UFOs. And so he said, well, I'll put you up with Carter. So Claiborne Pell, the ranking Senate Democrat, writes a letter to Jimmy Carter, and he says, I got these two friends, Scott Jones and John Alexander. They're coming through Atlanta. They'd like to stop at the Carter Center, and they'd like to talk UFOs. So he writes this letter, and you got to remember, this is the highest-ranking Democrat writing this letter to a former president. So Scott Jones says he sat there and waited for the response, and there was like a couple of weeks, and there was no response. So he phones the Carter Center in Atlanta, and he said, Senator Claiborne Pell wrote this letter on our behalf to the president. We just wonder what's going on, when we will get a reply. And the answer they got back is, there will be no reply. And they hung up the phone. And that is because the president can't be a player. The president can't get dragged into the UFO thing. So Jimmy Carter just refused a meeting. And he insults the top-ranking Democrat and just ignores the whole thing because he can't be a player. And that's the whole thing. Clinton told Rockefeller, he said, this is like the tar baby, the famous story from the South about the tar baby, where the tar baby, you punch the tar baby and your hand gets stuck to it, and then you put your other hand to try to get away and your other hand gets stuck, and next thing you know, you're all tied up with the tar baby. And that's what he said. The UFO subject is like a tar baby. You can't touch it. And that's the whole thing. So you got to stay clear. So when you get to Bill Clinton, and this is one of the things that really convinced me that the president knows what's going on. You know the story about Lawrence Rockefeller. Rockefeller from 90 to 96 goes to the president and he tries to get to the president. He never gets to the president because the president can't be a player. You can't let the president be involved. So he ends up at the science advisor's office, and the science advisor's writing these letters, and these 1,000 pages of letters are going back and forth, and everything that's going from the Rockefeller to the science advisor, everything from the science advisor back to Rockefeller is going through the First Lady's office. And I had these documents. I gave them to the Washington Post, the Associated Press, Fox News, and I didn't realize for years what the importance of these two documents that talk about Hillary Clinton. And the reason that it was going through Hillary Clinton's office was because the president can't be a player. So Hillary Clinton, all the stuff that was going from Rockefeller and back to the science advisor was going through Hillary's office, and she was going to the president and telling the president what's going on because the president can't be a player. So when Rockefeller at the end in August 95, Bill Clinton's losing the election. His advisor, Dick Morris, tells him, you got to go to the Rockefeller Ranch and you got to do the white water rafting and the camping and stuff. And Clinton is just furious. He wants to go to Hamptons to golf. He doesn't want to go to the Rockefeller Ranch. But the swing voters are into camping and they're into outdoors and stuff. So he goes there to win the swing voters. He goes to Rockefeller's Ranch. And the briefing takes place, this famous briefing where Rockefeller briefs the Clintons on UFOs. I was told by Antonio Huneeus, who wrote the Rockefeller Report, who told me that Marie Galbraith, who ran all the Rockefeller UFO material, told him categorically the president of the United States did not sit down at that briefing. The only person that was in the briefing was Hillary Clinton. So the question is, the president was at the lodge at the Rockefeller Ranch. He was there. Why did he not go downstairs and listen to Rockefeller? Because he can't be a player. He can't be seen to be playing in the UFO thing. So Hillary sits down, listens to the Rockefeller briefing, and then she doesn't ask any questions. The next morning she says to Rockefeller, okay, we've listened to you. Now don't ever bring up the subject again. Because the president knows what's going on. He doesn't need to get dragged in with Rockefeller. So Stephen Greer says he briefed the president. He said, I sent these documents, and they went through this guy, and he went to the president. He gave these documents to the president. He came back, and he said, the president said he didn't want to end up like JFK, like they're going to whack the president. This deep, dark cabal is going to whack the president. So I get the documents. When I file all the FOIAs with the Clinton Library, I go to Little Rock, and I'm looking at the main UFO file is 950 pages or whatever. But 600 pages of that stuff is stuff that Stephen Greer, documents that Stephen Greer had provided for this briefing. On the very first page of the first document said, President did not see. President didn't see it. Doesn't need to see it. Doesn't need to talk to Rockefeller. nobody has ever really directly contacted the president because the president can't be a player. He's running the cover-up. And so anybody who says the president is out of the loop, like Bill Clinton, has to explain to me, why did Rockefeller not, if Clinton is interested in UFOs and he can't get the answer and he's being messed around by the government, why would he not go down the stairs and listen to Rockefeller's briefing on the UFOs? Because he's got the answer. He doesn't need it. The same as Jimmy Carter. The story is told that Jimmy Carter was refused the UFO files by George Bush. What George Bush said, and George Bush was not the CIA director. You'll hear the story, he was the CIA director. He was not. He was the Ford CIA director who does the briefing for the president-elect. Jimmy Carter just got elected, so he wasn't president yet. He was president-elect. The former CIA director does the intelligence briefing, so that's when this happened. Does the intelligence briefing, he asks for the UFO files, and George Bush says to him, you cannot get these files. Curiosity is not sufficient need to know. If you want to get those files, you have to go to the House Committee on Science and Technology. If they're the top secret Roswell files, they're not going to be in the House Science and Technology Committee. That's a very low level of government. Senate is top, House is below, executive office is on the top. So it's not going to be there. He's already got the top secret UFO files. The files he's asking for are the files he promised to the people, the regular sighting files and all that kind of stuff. That's what he's asking for. That stuff would be in the House, in the Science and Technology Committee. And everybody says, oh, George Bush is MJ1, he's running the thing, and he just told Jimmy Carter to get lost, and he's the big, powerful MJ12. Jimmy Carter fired him. He never served a day under Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter didn't trust him. He fired him. He wasn't afraid of this big, powerful George Bush. So he wasn't intimidated. He was just asking for a different set of files than people think he was asking for. So you get these different stories of the presidents being interested, and these stories that I believe are created to try to make it look like the president really doesn't know. And there's just piles of them. I mean, you get the people have seen the Kimmel interview with Bill Clinton, where he says, my second administration, I had the Roswell thing, and I knew there was going to be a gazillion letters, and I went and I got all the Roswell files and I reviewed them. Well, if you didn't have an access, how could you review the Roswell files? Because there are no Roswell files. And when the analysis was done by Ben Hansen in Hollywood, he does an analysis of his hand motions and all sorts of stuff. Categorically, Clinton's lying. He's not telling the truth. So he says, I couldn't get anything, and I tried to figure it out, whatever. And you can tell it. He clearly is lying. And when you get Hillary, when you get John Podesta saying, I think I convinced her, and he says, I think I convinced her, she has to sit down and take a look at the material and release what she can. So he doesn't say she has to go to the Dark Cabal. She doesn't have to go to the Wizard of Oz, find the Wizard of Oz. She just has to, she's going to have the material. She puts it in front of her, and she has to release what she can. That's what John Podesta says. So he's confirming that she will have the material. The same as Hillary Clinton. When she's asked, she says, I'm going to try to do it if I can get agreement, which means there's going to be a meeting. Now with NSA or with MJ12, there's going to be a meeting if I can get agreement. So she's not saying either, I have to go look for the Wizard of Oz. I have to go and get talk to David Rockefeller and, the guys that run the world and find and get access. They both are saying she's going to get the files, and she releases, as John Podesta says, you have to weigh national security versus unthinking secrecy. And what you do, and John Podesta has said, people say there's nothing going on. I say John Podesta has said categorically, he was chief of staff for Bill Clinton for 3 years. He has said categorically, there are classified files that can be declassified. Simple story. He's saying there are classified files that can be declassified. He knows what's going on, and he's not saying what it is, but the president has access to this kind of stuff, and they have elected not to do it for whatever reason. There's been 13 administrations who have handled the UFO situation. There's been 7 Democratic administrations, 6 Republican administrations, and they've all done exactly the same thing. And if you were the president, if you came into my office, Dave, and you say, like, General, I can't tell you, Mr. President, you're not have a need to know, or tell me it's Blue Book or whatever, I'd say, thank you very much. You'd leave the room. I'd say, okay, I'd call my chief of staff. I'd say, okay, Dave, it's just in my office. I want his boss in here tomorrow at 10 o'clock, and I want Dave's resignation on my office at 9. And that's the way it would work. The president would not take it. He would just fire people until he got to where he wanted it, if he was really interested in getting it. The president doesn't have a security clearance. The president is in charge. All security is run by the president. He doesn't have a security clearance. He doesn't need a security clearance. He's the guy that's behind all the security for black budget programs, for contractors, for everything. It's all based on executive orders, which are run out of the executive office of the president.
Who then, in your mind, would be the disclosure president? Do you think it's Obama, or do you think if Hillary gets in that it's going to be her?
Well, this is where I talk about the John Podesta box. And I know Steve Bassett really doesn't agree. He believes that Podesta is moving because of his pressure. Now, his pressure did influence the whole situation, but Podesta's the same thing. He can't release classified material because he's going to jail. He'd be like Hillary with 147 agents looking at him. So what I think he did was create a box. And first I thought he created it for Hillary because he said, I think I convinced her. He's talking about Hillary. I think I convinced her. It's his interest. Hillary has not talked about the UFO subject. She has not. She has answered 3 questions. It was John Podesta who brought it up. He said to the reporters, ask Hillary about the aliens. So she has just answered 3 questions. She has never brought up the subject herself in a speech or whatever. So I thought he'd set her up because what happens is when Hillary gets in, something's going to happen. She's going to say, it's national security. I can't release it. Well, that confirms the cover-up. Something has to happen. So I thought he'd built a box to trap Hillary Clinton into having to do something once she got in, because he tried to get Bill Clinton to do it. Bill Clinton wouldn't do it. He tried to get Obama to do it. Obama wouldn't do it. He's big shot in both administrations. But now I think what he might have done is created a box for Obama, because what happened was he kept encouraging Hillary to people ask Hillary. So Hillary started talking about it, and then suddenly the New York Times does a story, and suddenly this thing goes viral, and these 3 reporters suddenly realize the media has been had. There's actually a story here. There's probably the biggest story of all times, and they start asking serious questions. So what happens is they ask the press secretary, but the press secretary says, I don't have a clearance. I can't answer. Ask the president. So then I'm waiting for them to ask the president, but he's in Asia. So there's a delay. And now we have a situation where I'm trying to encourage these reporters to ask the briefing question of Obama. So I can't see it lasting unless it completely fades away. I can't see Obama, because it's another, say, 7-8 months until Hillary actually takes office when she can actually do something. This thing ain't going to go 8 months. I mean, the White House is under a lot of pressure right now to answer this question. There's reporters asking serious questions, and it's a matter of time, and I'm putting pressure on these 3 reporters who are on our side, who believe there's a story here, and putting pressure and say, ask the president. Sooner or later, someone's going to ask the president, and that's when it falls apart, because nobody's ever asked the president the briefing question. Have you been briefed? They ask questions, are you interested in UFOs? Like Jimmy Carter. You know, I heard you saw a UFO, and he'll go off on his UFO and tell you about his UFO sighting and stuff, because he's evading the issue. He doesn't care. It doesn't mean anything. He saw a UFO, big deal. The big question is, have you been briefed? And that's the question I asked Dick Cheney in 2001 when he got into the White House, and he was chief of staff for Gerald Ford. He was Secretary of Defense under Bush Sr. And when I talked to him, he was the vice president. And that's when I asked him on the record, on tape, I said, Mr. Cheney, in all your jobs in government, have you ever been briefed on the subject of UFOs? If so, when was it, and what were you told? And he said, if I had been briefed on that subject, it would probably be classified, and I wouldn't be talking about it. And that is the true answer. It's classified, and I can't talk about it. So anybody who's running around saying that they've got a security clearance 15 levels above the president, you tell them they're full of it, because the president doesn't have a security clearance. How would you know you got a security clearance above the president? And the people just aren't going to talk. It's the most highly classified subject in the United States, and nobody's talking about it, except when they want to leak material. And they're leaking material so that people don't get caught back in 1947, where they have no idea what's going on. They're telling you there's abductions. They're telling you there's Area 51. There's a live alien at Area 51, that there was crafts at Area 51. They're leaking all this material, that they had a live alien that was an ambassador to the United States, and it's all leaked with this disinformation. So most of the stuff that we hear has come from the government. We don't realize it's come from the government. It's been leaked stuff that has come out, that because it can't be confirmed, because there's no legitimate documents, because if somebody wanted to really release the story, for example, say someone comes to you and they say they're a whistleblower and they want the story out. Well, why are you coming to me? I'm some guy from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, who didn't have a security clearance. If you really want this thing out, you go to the New York Times and you say, I want it out. You go to the Washington Post, you say, I want it out. whatever documents you want, I'm going to provide you whatever photographs you want, then you're going to get out. The reason they're coming to us is because they don't want it out. They want it sort of out. They want it partly out. If they really want it out, they would go to a major newspaper.
What hypothetically would happen if Donald Trump got in?
Donald Trump isn't interested. There's a video on YouTube that you'll see where he's signing and some guy's yelling at him. Do the UFO thing, release the UFO. And he's yelling at him for like about a minute. And he just totally ignores him. He really doesn't have an interest. Same as Bernie Sanders didn't have an interest. He was asked the question. Trump hasn't been asked the question because Trump doesn't talk to people. He's sort of like a potentate where he's telling everybody what's going on. He never had a bus. He never did town halls and stuff like that. And so he was never asked the question. But he's sort of a rogue guy. But I don't think, like, there's even these stories now that they're afraid to tell him. They're afraid to actually brief him because the nominee for the Republican Party gets an intelligence briefing. And they're actually afraid to brief Trump because they don't know what he's going to do. I mean, he is a sort of a lone wolf type guy that might. So they may. No, I don't think they can keep it from him. It's a good question if he were to get in. But the thing you got to remember is that the guy that briefed Obama tells a story where when he goes in there and he says, what do you call it? The wake up call or something. He says, I go in there and I say, Mr. President, you're doing intelligence briefing. Say, we're doing this, like we're killing these people, we're running this country, we're doing this, all this, black budget, evil stuff, we're doing this, 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 we're doing this. And I just want to let you know, Mr. President, we do this on behalf of the President of the United States. Therefore, Mr. President, when you get briefed, unless you tell us, when you get sworn in, unless you tell us to stop, the afternoon after you get briefed in, we're still going to be doing this stuff. And so it becomes your cover-up. So once you're in there, suddenly it's your cover-up. It's your CIA. It's you that's going to hang. It's not anybody else. So that's why everybody seems to play the game. And because it's law, it's legal. The president is constitutionally responsible for upholding the Constitution. He's the head of state. So if you're dealing with a foreign power, which is aliens, it has to be the head of state. So it's you that's going to go down. It's your CIA that's covering it up. It's your military. You're the head of the civilian commander of the military. You're the one that's going down and going to go in history as the guy who had all the lying stuff. It's pretty hard once you're in there. Everybody, that's why I said there's 13 administrations. Everybody's played the game. And I say the reason they played the game is because they've all believed that it's the right thing to do. When you see the facts, if you see all the things that could go wrong, you go, oh, yeah, okay, drilling another oil well. Holy cow, let's kick it down the road like everything else, and we'll deal with this in 5 years. Because when you see all the stuff that could go wrong, it would scare the living daylights out of anybody, maybe even Donald Trump.
We only got about 1 minute left with you, Grant, tonight, and I want to say thank you so much for being on Spaced Out Radio. It's always a pleasure to have you on, as we do it about once a year with you. I would love for you to tell people about the Alien Cosmic Expo this weekend in Brantford, Ontario, when you're going to be speaking, when you're going to be a part of that panel.
I'm not even sure. I think I lecture Friday afternoon. I have a 1.5 hour lecture. I'm going to do the spiritual implications of the UFO phenomena, which gets into this where I'm saying that it's a lot less physical than you think it is, what reality is, how they get here, how they get through time and space. And the panel, I think, is Saturday morning for 3 hours. And there's about maybe 6 researchers, and there's about 6 people, reporters, who are going to be asking questions. It's going to be the almost the same as the citizens hearing that was done by Stephen Bassett. So I'm expecting some good questions from them. I've got a bunch of documents. I'm going to give every one of them to go through these documents. I'm going to present the best evidence that I think there is, like the Canadian top secret document, the Hillary Clinton documents, and we'll see where it goes. It should be an interesting weekend.
Grant, always a pleasure to have you with us. We'll talk to you very soon, and thank you so much for being with us.
I thank you for your interest.
Take care. Grant Cameron on Spaced Out Radio tonight, his website, presidentialufo.com. He will be speaking at the Alien Cosmic Expo in Brantford, Ontario, coming up this week.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Every month on Spaced Out Radio, we look into the deep and dark reports of cryptids roaming around the world with me, Rob Morphy, from Cryptopia.us. I would love it if you would join me and host Dave Scott as we delve into the most arcane stories and reports regarding creatures of the unknown. My job is to hunt down the details and bring the evidence forward to you. These aren't your regular Bigfoot stories I'm talking about either. You can find out more about crypto history at spacedoutradio.com.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
Is the 24-hour world starting to wear you down? Let me from Rivulet Reiki and Ratings lend you a hand. Hi, this is Jolene, and if you're in need of Reiki or a realm reading, come to my website, rivuletrr.wix.com/rivuletrr&r, and let us help you out. At Rivulet, I specialize in healing your body, mind, and soul, no matter where you are. And be sure to check out the Rivulet R&R Facebook page for your best deals. Remember, it's time for you to make some time for you.
Find yourself constantly looking up in the sky, looking for answers? Have you had extraterrestrial contact? Are you an abductee? Looking for answers to your experiences? Hi there, I'm R. Keith Andrews, Spaced Out Radio's resident ET expert. Join me live the first Friday of every month where I take questions from the Spaced Out Radio chat room and help you understand those from the far-off world. It's 2 hours of knowledge every experiencer should listen to. Hope to see you there.
Did you know that Spaced Out Radio runs 7 days a week? Hi, it's James Tyson from Spaced Out Weekend. Every Saturday and Sunday night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, you can join me and my guests for some great chatter about what's going on out in the universe, or even in that dark part of the basement you really don't want to go back into. Well, let's find the answers to your experiences together. So come on up to Uncle Jimbo's cabin on the weekend. For more information, look us up at spacedoutradio.com.
Would you like to connect with us on Spaced Out Radio? Head to spacedoutradio.com to check out the latest shows, guests, and sponsors. And don't forget to sign up for the Space Travelers Club. You'll find all you need at spacedoutradio.com. And welcome back for the final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. Thank you so much for joining us if you're listening in on the SHR Media Network over on the Spaced Out Radio chat room on Spreaker. Thank you so much. If you're on Facebook at Euphoria Chronicles, Forest Moon Paranormal, Chronicles of the Unknown, we appreciate you being with us as well. And of course, our flagship, SOR Space Travelers. You guys have been busy indeed tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're going to follow us on social media, you could do so at Spaced Out Radio on Twitter. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, I could be followed at Dave Scott, SOR. Our YouTube channel, subscribe to it, is Spaced Out Radio Show, and our website is spacedoutradio.com. It'll have a brand new look coming up. Grant Cameron was with us for the first 2 hours of the show, and now we bring in Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. They deal with everything from ET abduction to paranormal to Bigfoot, absolutely everything. Eric, thank you so much for hopping in.
Hey, it's always a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure to have you with us as well. Now, you tuned in the SOR Space Travelers for the last couple hours listening to Grant Cameron. He's a fast speaker. He tries to jam in a lot of information in a short period of time. We can agree with that.
And that's cool that you have archives, because everyone can go back and listen and absorb it again.
And you know what? I agree with you on that. I think I'm going to have to do that myself. But he had some real interesting takes in regards to the disclosure process and the history of the White House. And I think it takes a real, genuine researcher to sit there and say that, you know what? After 30 years of research, I've been wrong. I don't believe that there is a shadow government above the government. And I do believe the president has full control over disclosure, but chooses not to open up that Pandora's box. What was your opinion on that?
I would have to listen to it again, honestly. I have my doubts. I still kind of hang on to the MJ-12 and the shadow government. I do. Is it because I'm kind of geared that way? Probably. I really don't think the presidents know as much as people think they do. I still don't.
Well, you know what? He did bring up some good points, though, in regards to the only president who's really talking about their own UFO sighting is Carter. I mean, we can't go further back than that because there's no presidents before him still alive. You know, Reagan has passed on. Then we have the Bushes, and the Bushes really brought in more so a military-industrial complex with them, and in between them was Bill Clinton, who had an interest, but really didn't give Mr. Rockefeller the time of day, as Grant said, if you take Grant's word verbatim.
Mm-hmm.
So
here's where it's going to come into question. Bill had an interest. If Hillary gets in, is Hillary going to follow through and bring through what she said she's going to bring with UFOs?
I think that's such a tough question.
It is.
She made a commitment to John Podesta. Right. And from what I do know, John Podesta, part of his agreement of leaving the White House under Barack Obama and joining the Hillary Clinton campaign was he wanted her to agree to disclose the UFO files and what's at Area 51. And you have to admit, I mean, when you're dealing on that type of power, it's not like setting up a small home business where you do everything on a handshake and take someone's word for it. There's papers that need to be signed. This is legal. And I can't see him going in there and saying, look, Hillary, I'll give you a man-to-woman handshake on this, that if you get in, you got to disclose. Otherwise, I'm going to run away and not help you. I don't see him doing that at all. I think there was a contract involved, because at that level, everything is contractual. And I would say that Hillary has to keep her word. But I do believe that she is going to hide a lot behind, if she does get in, she's going to hide a lot behind the national security. But then again, if she uses the national security card, is that not disclosure right there?
Yeah, what you don't say says a whole lot. Yeah, it's there, but I can't talk about it. That's a yes, if anything. And yeah, I found it really interesting about his security clearance comments too, as far as who's got what and how. But somebody brought up the point. What is Glenn's security? Did he have a security clearance, or is he just research?
No, he said numerous times on the show that he does not have security clearance. What he has done to gather his information is gone over copious amounts of notes that have been brought forward that are declassified, as well as he has worked his own sources in order to get close to what is actually truly happening. See, when you're at that level of the Grant Camerons, the Steve Bassett's, the Stanton Friedmans of the world who are researching this topic, when your name gets that big, much like, certain radio hosts, people come to you. You don't have to go searching for much. People come to you. They see your interest. They see, and they feel you out. They wonder if you're genuine, and they look to make sure that you're genuine. And they look to make sure that they are going to be protected when they give you information. It's much the same way, Eric. And where I understand that field, it's much the same way as when I was a journalist working in sports. And I would cover the Vancouver Canucks and the NHL in Vancouver. And you would have people and players coming up to you, hey, you didn't hear this from me, but this is what I know, this is who's getting traded, this is who's on the block, and I heard so-and-so is involved. Or I had one player tell me that he had asked for a trade, but he wouldn't go public with it, right? I mean, they come up to you if they trust you. People want, it's human nature to give out information. It really is human nature to do that. And how many people out there really truly keep a secret?
Pretty much no one.
Exactly. So when it comes down to it, I mean, you have certain people, and I would say it's the Golden Agers who are unfortunately dying off. The greatest era is dying off, unfortunately, because of age.
They're the ones that have the secrets.
They're the ones who have the secrets. They're the ones who are going to their deathbed and not giving that final confession if they worked at Area 51 or they worked on Roswell or things like that, because they swore an oath to their country, and by God, they're going to keep it. Doesn't matter whether it's Canada, the United States, wherever it is. Loyalty to the flag means a lot more than loyalty to family and friends. Do you see what I'm saying?
It does indeed. Yep, exactly.
So when you look at it, and you sit there and you listen to the stories, and you listen to everything that is going on, people would come to Grant. So technically, does he have security clearance? No. But he knows enough people. Like when he, I thought he was a little critical on what Tom DeLonge is doing. But if Tom DeLonge, which I read an article today, and if you don't know who Tom DeLonge is, he is the former lead singer of Blink-182. He has jumped both feet in a barrel on the field of ufology. And he's saying that he has been talking to people in the NSA and the people in government. Well, gee whiz, they're only going to give him what they want him to know. They're not going to give him, yes, we have bodies out of Roswell. Yes, we have UFOs at Area 51. You know what I'm saying? They're not going to give him
that. They're going to make him a disinformation mole if they really wanted to.
They could, or what they could be doing is knowing that he is 40 years old or close to 40 years old. He is a very popular person in the music industry. He holds, for some, a lot of credibility, and that might be the perfect guy to bring it into the field.
Start the disclosure process?
Absolutely. That could be exactly what it is. So I thought he was quite harsh on that, but in reality, he might be a shill. You really don't know, and we're not going to know until we see what DeLonge has produced.
Have to research it.
Absolutely. I think everybody who has an interest in this field should. Because in the end, I'm not sure they want disclosure to happen. And I've changed my stance on this. I'm not sure they want it to happen because I don't know how they're going to be able to control, or if they've figured out how they can control the reaction of people. Because the reactions for everyone is going to be different. The atheists are going to say, oh my God, pun intended. Okay?
Right.
The religious, whether it's the Christians or the Muslims or whoever, who are saying that everything that comes out of the sky that isn't angelic is a demon. Right. They are going to, they are going to be rudely awakened. Yeah. And I still think there is no safe way right now to break down disclosure. And we'll hear Stephen Bassett tomorrow night say people are ready for disclosure. Which people? Personally, I am.
Yeah.
I think a lot of our...
Question tomorrow night.
Personally, I'm interested in disclosure. I think a lot of our audience is interested in disclosure. I'm just not sure if, some Christian area in the middle of Louisiana or Kentucky or Arkansas, somewhere in the South where they're still taking their religion very seriously.
The Bible Belt's going to be rocked.
The Bible Belt is going to be blown away. Absolutely.
And like we talked about before, the Pope, I still say, would be your best bet to break it open. And even that is a hit and miss.
I agree with you on that. I fully agree with you in regards to that. I think the Pope is someone who could help, considering he controls 1.6, 1.3 billion Catholics around the world. I don't know, though, if Hillary will be the one. I really don't. I think she has enough problems, and if she's being investigated, who knows if she even makes it to the election.
And that might have been, if they don't want disclosure to happen, it could very well have been, yeah, sure, I'll make disclosure happen, but she knows she's not going to make president. I mean, I don't know. We don't know what's in the cards. We really don't. Is it going to be Trump? I sure the hell hope not, but it very well could be.
Well, and that's why I asked Grant right at the end of the show, what about Donald Trump? And if Donald Trump doesn't care because he's more interested in building a wall against the Mexicans, and now I guess we're considered the snow Mexicans,
right?
I think it is very, very interesting indeed to see what truly is going to happen. Because I think Donald Trump, once he gets into that office, if he does, is going to be in for a rude awakening for what actually works and what actually doesn't work. And I really believe that he will have his eyes open. I think that it's a lot harder of a job than what he thinks it's going to be.
Yeah, and I'm really curious. He still hasn't said, I don't think, who his vice president's going to be. And it sure the hell better not be Palin. Because I know that came up
a
month ago.
Absolutely.
I really don't think it is, but
I don't think so either. But, in the end, if he doesn't have interest in breaking open the UFO files because he's going to, fearmonger that everybody from, east of New York is going to come and attack America, that's scary too. But we're not going to make this into a political conversation. This is about disclosure tonight. And if Trump gets in, it's very curious to see what will happen. Is the disclosure all of a sudden off the whiteboard, erased, that it doesn't happen?
Okay, now what if the aliens want to make disclosure happen? Now, there's a strong argument, I know, that if the aliens wanted disclosure, they would have made it happen already. And that's possible, too. But what if this UFO ET fence that the government's created is keeping them from actually doing a full disclosure? I mean, we have abductees all the time, I realize that. But that might not be enough for them to do the full disclosure they want. And the ET fence that the government's created or creating from Northrop might be just enough to keep them from doing it. That's just a possibility.
And you're dealing with people with what you do with Forest Moon Paranormal in Washington State. Do you think the people you're dealing with in your chat groups, in your research, are ready for disclosure?
I do. Yeah, because most of ours are already open-minded. They're already open to the possibility. But we're only talking 3,800 people. Now, when you go across to all the other groups I'm in, and they're all arguing about disclosure as well, that's just a very small ratio of people, though, to the world. I would say a majority of the people honestly don't believe in the paranormal, to be honest with you. Just going by the reactions I get when I do promos to the public, When the public hears you're a paranormal investigator, you get a whole lot of scoffing and laughing, and yeah, you're a nut job. You really do. So when you look at the overall response from the public, I don't think they're ready. Then who's going to be the first one they're going to look for is your paranormal investigator. Oh my God, you were right. You know. So, but no, when it comes down to it, I say just brace yourself and hope for the best. Honestly, and I don't mind living in the mountains.
Well, can you do anything more than that, though? And this isn't about fear mongering. It isn't about saying whether it's Democrat or whether it is
not at all.
Republican.
Politics, they have no play in this.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with that whatsoever. So, I mean, when you look at it, do you really, really sense that this is something that needs to come out of the woodworks, or do you think that it is something that is, still needing to be stuffed behind the door where we don't show the company?
I think it needs to come out of the woodwork. I do, and I think it's slowly been coming out of the woodwork with the media, and not the news media, with the movies that have been released. I think that's their version of coming out of the woodwork. I mean, you had E.T. back in the 80s, Close Encounter of the Third Kind in the 70s. I think they've been working that way since at least the 70s, just with Steven Spielberg and Disney and some of the other companies that are kind of manipulated by the government to an extent.
Right. And I can understand that. I can understand where that is. But here's the irony of it all. When you have people pushing for disclosure, Hillary now talking about disclosure, you have other people talking about what is going on in regards to ETs, John Podesta, whoever you want to talk about, it is out there right now. And then we look at Hollywood creating Independence Day Part 2, where the aliens are coming to take us over again. So that fear-mongering, when it comes to Hollywood, is it not still going forward?
It is, because opening the minds of the people that, not only are the aliens here, but they're negative. But then you have to go back and and I've dealt with nothing but negative entities or negative aliens. Haven't seen any positive. But I know they're there, because, you've got, on your show, you've got people that are always discussing the positive side of extraterrestrials. So they're there, because there's people there's contactees that are dealing with them. But have you seen a positive ET movie, other than, ET was a cute little guy that was phoning home, and, I wouldn't say he's cute and cuddly, but yeah, you don't see a whole lot of positive portrayal in the media. So,
Absolutely. And it seems like since the 70s and 80s, we have taken a sharp, drastic turn through Hollywood that extraterrestrials are evil. They're bad. They're not allowed.
The only other one that had more of a positive twist was Contact with Jodie Foster. That didn't show a negative portrayal, but it showed a supernatural portrayal. But no, you're right. Everything else is all right down to current is nothing but the aliens are evil. They're here to take over the planet. They've got an agenda. It's negative. It's here to destroy everybody.
Well, case in point, Eric, sorry for cutting you off, but case in point is Fire in the Sky.
Right.
Travis Walton has changed his entire story than what was in the original movie, where he was taken and they were operating on him and doing horrendous, heinous things that most people would expect aliens to do. He's now coming out and saying, look, I don't think they planned to shoot me with their beam, but I do believe that they tried to save my life after accidentally doing that. So,
and that's very possible.
When you look at all of that, it really makes you wonder whether or not, okay, what was Hollywood's attitude in order to change the story? Was it because it made for a more interesting ending or storyline that he was having these horrendous things happen to him? Or was it because they are being told?
That's possible, too. Because, yeah, I remember I watched Fire in the Sky at least 5 or 6 or more times, and that is very possible. But by the way they portrayed it with the tractor beam, and it shocked him. If that's how it was, if that's how it really happened, I could very well see him dying from being electrocution of the tractor beam, and obviously they brought him back to life if he came back down. So very well, yeah.
Well,
no doubt they brought him back alive.
I got a question from Eric in the Spaced Out Radio chat room on Spreaker for you. Eric, do you think the issue is being forced by extraterrestrials?
That's a very good question. And I'm kind of leaning that way. Potentially, yeah. Because if they're not being allowed to make disclosure happen, and they've already infiltrated the governments, which is a very good possibility, and it sounds crazy, but it is a very good possibility, because they're already here. Ask any contactee, ask anyone that's experienced them. They are already here. They're underground. We've got underground species. We've got species in the mountains. So could they have infiltrated a government? Very much so. There's species that actually look like humans and walk among us. So that's a very good possibility. If we sign a contract, say Dwight Eisenhower, for example, who signed the contract with the abductions, and they came to Jimmy Carter or Bill Clinton, who's showing an interest, who knows? Maybe they signed a contract and went back on it. And now the aliens want their end of the contract fulfilled.
It's one of those things we may never know. That would fall under the national security banner, my friend.
Right? It would very well. And Patriot Act might even have something. Who here's ever actually read the entire Patriot Act? All, 500 pages?
Is it possible? That's the other one. Is it possible to actually read that?
I've got it. Now, what is it? Is it a doctored copy of it? I don't know. I've downloaded it off the internet.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Off government websites. In fact, I think I've got it in the Forest Moon Library. I'll have to look at it.
Absolutely. We're going to hop out for a break here, Eric. We're going to take a break here at the bottom of the hour before we come back with the final half hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. We are talking with Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. Him or Corrine DeWinter from PurplePlates.com come in the final hour of the show to kind of break down what we've been talking about for the night. It's always an interesting time when we get good opinions on the show. Earlier on, we had Grant Cameron from PresidentialUFO.com on. He'll be speaking at the Alien Cosmic Expo this weekend in Brantford, Ontario, Canada. It's going to be very interesting indeed to see where this goes as we go forward in regards to disclosure. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back after this break.
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from UFOcop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio?
Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us.
From the radio, commercials, to banners, to social media.
Have a product you'd like our host to endorse? We can do that too.
Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. With their money-back guarantee and the many benefits, how can you afford not to get one? Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry.
Right here, this is where we divulge the fruit of our research. Here on the Webster Phenomena every Saturday night at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern on Spaced Out Radio.
Attention Spaced Out Radio listeners. For only $5 a month, you can join Spaced Out Radio Space Travelers. Your membership at spacedoutradio.com will give you access to private fan area on the website, get you a monthly newsletter, draws for monthly swag, and a whole lot more. Sign up today to become a part of the Spaced Out Radio experience.
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
Greetings and salutations, space travelers, from the Chronicles of the Unknown team.
What is Chronicles of the Unknown? I keep hearing about this thing.
It's a new paranormal reality TV show based right here in beautiful British Columbia, Canada. Follow our team as we uncover claims of activity on the Caribou Gold Rush Trail. You can also follow us here every third Monday, where two members of our team will be available to answer your questions. We'll give you some equipment updates and some of our experiences on the road, right here on Spaced Out Radio.
Did you know that Spaced Out Radio runs 7 days a week? Hi, it's James Tyson from Spaced Out Weekend. Every Saturday and Sunday night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, you can join me and my guests for some great chatter about what's going on out in the universe, or even in that dark part of the basement you really don't want to go back into. Well, let's find the answers to your experiences together. So come on up to Uncle Jimbo's cabin on the weekend. For more information, look us up at spacedoutradio.com.
Missed most of tonight's show? Don't worry, you didn't miss a thing. You can head to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and download our archives for free. And don't forget to get your Space Travelers membership today. Now, back to tonight's show. Welcome back to Space Out Radio tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're listening in on the SHR Media Network, over on Paranormal, well, the Space Out Radio chat room on Spreaker, and on Facebook at Euphoria Chronicles, Forest Moon Paranormal, Chronicles of the Unknown, and our flagship, SOR Space Travelers. Good to have you with us. I know it's a late night, but good that you are sticking through. You people are troopers in the chat room tonight, and all of you listening as well. Appreciate your time. Tomorrow night on the show, we're going to continue with the disclosure movement and topic. Stephen Bassett from the Paradigm Research Group will be joining us. He is also speaking at the Alien Cosmic Expo this weekend in Brantford, Ontario. And once again, if you're on the East Coast, even if you're in the U.S., grab your passports, come across the border, check out this conference. It's going to be a good one. All the big names are there, and they are going to get down and dirty with the topic of disclosure. A reminder to all of you, if you follow us on social media, thank you. If you want to, you can follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, I can be followed at Dave Scott, SOR. Our YouTube channel, subscribe to it, is Spaced Out Radio Show, and our new look website should be fired up within the next couple of days, is spacedoutradio.com. Joining us for the final hour tonight is Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. Eric deals with the harder side of experiences, whether it's alien abduction, cryptid sightings like Bigfoot, paranormal. Very interesting indeed. And one day, Eric, we got to get into some of those down and dirty stories that you deal with. I do want to do that with you one time here soon.
All right.
We've been talking a lot about disclosure tonight, and we were talking, kind of following up Grant Cameron's topic from the first 2 hours of the show regarding what should or should not happen with disclosure. Is it imminent? Is it getting closer? There are people who believe it is right around the corner. There are people, much like you and me, thinking that it's probably still a taboo subject to allow out to the people. But let's talk about people who are having experiences right now. There's people all around the world who are being taken, some good experiences, some bad experiences, and some people just don't know about. When you look at disclosure and you bring in the contact experiences people are having, a lot of people are saying that disclosure has already happened, it just hasn't been fully brought forward by the governments. And for some reason we seem to need this government approval that it is happening or going to happen. Do you think it's actually needed by the governments to come out and say, we need this and we need to hear from the president's voice or Vladimir Putin's voice or the Pope's voice in order to admit that disclosure is happening?
I think so, or I think, honestly, even if CNN was to come out and say, oh my God, something's going on, or Fox, oh my God, something's going on. I think if they wanted to force the government's hand, if news broadcasters went against what they're being told to say, and came out and said it, I think that would be just as good, because then the government's got to force their hand, or they're forcing the government's hand if they did that. Would that happen? No, because I think they're too controlled. But I think that would be another step or another way of making disclosure happen, because where do you get your news from? Me, I get my news mostly from Facebook, to be honest with you. Just what news stories people are talking about. I don't watch news because to me it's garbage.
Well, and I understand the whole media concept, and trust me, you've heard me as a former media guy on this show rip into the media and their role in regards to it by dropping the ball numerous times on this show. And like Grant said tonight, it's only been the last 4 or 5 weeks where the media has actually shown interest, because the New York Times finally took interest and everybody else is now playing catch-up on the target. But when you get to Facebook and you get to other social media, there is a whole grandeur, if I can use that word, of sensationalism when it comes to these topics. It's hard to know the truth now in the media because the fringe media and alternative media are blowing things out of proportion. Publicly, we have people like Alex Jones blowing things out of proportion and sensationalizing things. You know, whether it's FEMA camps, whether it's Jade Helm, whether it's the Powerball winner. Okay? You can sit there and criticize that for how he's done that. And then we have the mainstream media, which is still the more popular, who always seems more interested in what's happening in Hollywood and these nitpicky stories, whether it's Justin Bieber, whether it's Caitlyn or Bruce Jenner, whatever you want to call him, whatever, or her, whether it's the Kardashians, whether it's, LeBron James or Michael Jackson, and they don't want to cover the hard topics, okay? And what baffles me is this. If I'm a news director, and I realize the world being 24/7, that as a reporter, you write your story and then you drop the topic because you have to move on. That what Grant said tonight earlier is 100% true. But this is where the job of a columnist has to come in and start hammering this on a daily basis. But no one wants to put their reputation on the line. That's the problem. So is it the sensationalism that is driving this away from the alternative media, or is it the mainstream that is dropping the ball, in your opinion?
I think it's the mainstream dropping the ball. Or if they both went neutral and they both started working on the same, at the same time, I don't know. I really don't know where to go with it. 'Cause it can go either way. You've had the Inquirer, for example, for 20, 30 years. That have they had a little bit of grain of truth to anything they've said? Maybe. So yeah, I'd have to stick with the mainstream media though, Because I think they need to be held to the fire and held to the standard that they need to be on, and not just, with being controlled by the government or by the networks for ratings.
What public, or let me rephrase that, but what portion of is that the public's fault because they are eating up this stuff, this non-news, shall we call it, non-news. They're eating it up like cornflakes for morning breakfast. Okay, they're not. They're sick and tired of hearing the murders, the war on the Second Amendment. They're tired of hearing about ISIS. They're tired of hearing about big pharma and healthcare and everything like that. And they almost use, whether it's sports, whether it is, infotainment, as it's called in the media business.
Right.
It's almost an escape from reality. And is it the public not holding the media then up to a higher standard? Because I'll tell you right now, I understand that there's only 6 companies that own most of the media networks in the United States. Up here in Canada, there is a number, but what really helps Canadian journalism out is we have a company called the Canadian Broadcast Corporation, or the CBC for short, that is which is a publicly funded government agency. Not government agency, but a government-run media outlet, so that way everyone around the country gets some sort of news or broadcast of it, whether it's radio or television. Now, because it's publicly funded, I know the CBC has never been shut down on stories. Okay, I know that from my time in journalism. So I still have a hard time believing that you go into newsrooms, and I know it's not happening in certain newsrooms across Canada, and I know there are detractors and people out there who will say that it is happening and that I'm being naive. But in the U.S., is it truly a problem, or are we just thinking there is a problem?
Okay, in America, yeah. I think you're right. I do think you're right, because I know I do sway on the topic. I do, but yeah, I think the public should hold the media to the fire. I think the public, it's probably about 50-50. I'm going to go there. I think the society should hold. What am I trying to say? I think they should hold each other to a standard, if that makes sense.
Well, the media is supposed to have a standard, and I have talked with journalism instructors or professors on this show before, and we've had some great conversations about the way the media works. And I think more so than not, it's more so about the reporter wanting to save face and credibility for the job, because journalism does have a lot of people who are younger, better looking, more face-friendly for television, if we go that route, or voice-friendly in radio. And I strongly believe that there's probably more so reporters who do not want to put their credibility on the line, rather than actually taking an interest in seeing if it's real or not.
Yeah, kind of like your discussion the other night with calling your journalist buddy about the UFO and him just laughing it off. Yeah, they don't take it serious. Some of them will, but yeah, I'd say a lot of them. He was probably saving face.
So, do you believe then that it's a problem with the media? And I'll re-ask you this question. Do you believe it's a problem with the media, or it's a problem with the public not holding people up to the Walter Cronkite, Dan Rather type of standard?
I would go with the public.
I mean, look what happened with Brian Williams.
Right. If the public held them to a standard, they would to save face on that side, they would. Yeah, if the public held them to a standard, then they would lose their job. They would lose credibility on that side if the public said we ain't gonna put up with it no more.
Well, you know what? It's an interesting topic indeed, because I think it's something that we're going to have to try and arrange for this show, is trying to get a journalism professor in here from the United States and maybe one from Canada in regards to the way journalism is supposed to work compared to how it is working. Because I know, for instance, and I still have a couple of my journalism instructors going back 20 years this year when I went into college. Still can't believe it's 20 years already. Okay, that I took my journalism degree, or started for my journalism degree, and I know, looking at their Facebook posts, how insulted they are by seeing the quality of journalism out there on both sides of the border. That here we are training journalists, and they're being kind of pushed into infotainment type reporting, and that's not journalism at all. Journalism is supposed to have an accountability to it. Journalism is supposed to have just a type of teaching and philosophy that you are the voice of the public. You are the ones who hold politicians accountable. You are the ones.
It's basically dumbing down. They're dumbing down journalists to dumb down society, is what it sounds like. Just like the education system with America, they're dumbing down the education system. They're making our kids not as smart as they used to be. It's all about passing the test. They don't teach education; they teach how to pass the test. And it sounds like they're doing the same thing with journalism on that one. They're dumbing down journalism. That's
a dangerous concept if they are doing that. A very dangerous concept, because when you dumb down the public, you can pretty much get away with anything, because the public's not paying attention. And the role of the journalist is to be that watchdog, that set of eyes, whether it's on disclosure. And if we use the topic of disclosure for the sake of our audience and the sake of the topic tonight, there's been a lot of ball dropping in the outfield and the infield on that one. And it is a little bit disgusting, in my opinion, because reporters are not doing their job in finding the source. They're not doing their job in reporting the news. I know if I was still in the newsroom, and this is just me, I'd be a hound dog all over this John Podesta stuff. Now, up here in Canada, it's not going to make a difference. But if I was reporting in the U.S., and say I was in the East Coast, doesn't matter what outlet you are, I would make it my personal mission to find out why John Podesta wants this to happen. And you could do a great 2-week story that you might win a Pulitzer for.
Right?
It's possible. You could win a major award over this if you did the report properly. But like I said at the top of the show, how could any journalist, and ego is huge in journalism. It's huge. The pay may not be huge, but the ego is massive when it comes to journalists. We all want that breaking story. And here you are, as we mentioned at the top of the show, and Grant mentioned it as well, the biggest story in the history of mankind next to Jesus Christ himself coming down. And nobody is running with the ball. Nobody is.
They're all focused on Trump and Hillary. Hillary. That's all the focus has been for the last year. Has been this race. And it almost, using the term false flag, it's almost like it's just a smoke screen to keep you focused. And all of a sudden someone dropped the ball of disclosure and it's just getting walked on.
I find that interesting. I really do. Bob Burrell in the SOR Space Traveler says back in his day in broadcasting, he had been told to kill stories.
Mm-hmm.
I never had that happen. I never saw it happen in our newsroom. And I worked in one of the largest newsrooms in Western Canada at that time. And, I'm not saying Bob is wrong, okay, because it might be something along the lines of maybe it affects an advertiser. Maybe it affects somebody along those lines, okay? But as for a governmental story in our newsroom, and I never saw it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And either way, if you're being told not to run a story or to kill the story, that's a dangerous precedent. Dangerous precedent when you're doing that, because you are taking what people need to know and you're making it personal. It's just like, if you watch the news or listen to the radio, when I went to broadcasting school, we were always taught, never be a part of the story. Your job is to report the story, never be a part of the story. And if you look at a lot of television stories now, you hear reporters say, well, so-and-so told me, or I witnessed this, or I heard this. They're making themselves part of the story.
Right. Exactly.
And that is wrong as well. You're not a part of the story. Sorry, you're not. Right? Your job is to report the story. Okay, here's what Bob Burrell, following up on what he said.
Mm-hmm.
Bob says, Crestbrook Forest Industries, one of the radio station's owners at CKEK in 1989, made him cut a story out. Okay, so that would be what it was. So it was a political pressure there.
Right.
So there is political pressure. Forest Moon Paranormal. Go ahead. Sorry.
And I'm sure it has to do with, what country. Canadian broadcast, yeah. When I was growing up, being here in Washington, I listened to CBC. We had Mr. Dress Up. We had all the kids' educational shows. So I'm very familiar with CBC. But, yeah, when you turn it over to American TV, in Canada, it probably does still have a higher standard as far as broadcast goes.
Well, I don't think it's a matter of whose standard is higher. It's more or less a standard of what do people want. Because in the end, you could have the best news team around, but if people are not tuning in and you're losing money on it,
right,
you're not going to have listenership. And it's all about ratings now. It's all about trying to gain the financial advantage rather than what it is taking care of the public. And that is a sad state of affairs. And that's even happening up here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? It's one of those things that just seems to happen. I remember being in my newsroom and working in sports. Our sportscasts were 3 minutes long when I started. By the time I left, they were down to 90 seconds. Because people wanted more infotainment. The numbers said that people wanted, more Hollywood stories, more gossip stories, more Entertainment Tonight type stories. And when you have a bunch of accountants running it rather than true journalists here,
right? So maybe the money is the bankers are running it then. Maybe.
Absolutely. You got a bunch of bean counters who are running radio stations now who are more interested in the bottom line. Like, I'll give you a sick story up in Canada here. Well, it's not a sick story. That's Alex Jones type sensationalism there. But in Canada, we must run Canadian content between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. So for the morning drive, right through until the afternoon drive is over. After 6 p.m., finding Canadian content on a lot of radio stations. Let's say we're focusing on talk radio here, not news stations, not music stations, but talk radios. Right. Okay, a lot of the programming, especially in the sporting field, actually comes out of the U.S., whether it's the ESPN feed or the Fox Sports feed. That's what's running at night, instead of creating your own content. Because, A, syndication is cheaper than having to pay someone, say, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year to host a night show. And so what happens here is you're diluting your home interest. And the media, if we get into the media not caring, they really don't care, because in their mind it's about profit. It's easier to pay $150 a night to listen to ESPN radio and gain the commercial advertisement off of that may garner $5,000, $10,000 for 3 hours, than it is to pay someone, say, $100 an hour or $50 an hour or $30 an hour to sit there and talk about the topic, because that's the expenditure. And that's the problem right now in Radioland up here in Canada. So it's not all rosy up here. I can tell you that.
Right.
It's not all rosy. I'll give you another example. There are very few shows like this one up in Canada. And there are stations across this country that are picking up coast to coast.
Huh.
Why would you...
They're syndicated, though, right?
Absolutely. They're syndicated.
Yeah.
But once again, it comes into a cheaper offer. It comes into a cheaper philosophy, And don't forget, because you're our big brother down there, there is the attitude, well, if it's American, it must be better. Because everything's done bigger and better in the United States.
Right.
Hell, you look at the interest in this show, and this show is growing. Eric, you look at the interest in this show, because I see the statistics for this show. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you, I'm going to pull them up right now while we have a couple minutes left here. I think you'll be blown away by this.
Okay.
We have 771 followers on Spreaker now. I'm pretty impressed with that. And almost 40,000 listeners since we've been on, or 40,000 plays on our episodes since we started on Spreaker. That's pretty cool. All right, let me see where I can find this right now. Geolocation. Okay, this is the breakdown of our listeners here over the last 30 days. 84.6% of my listeners on Spaced Out Radio on a nightly basis are based out of the United States. 9.1% are Canadian. 2.6% are from the United Kingdom. 0.9% Australia. 0.6% Croatia. 0.2% the Netherlands. Well, they must know that I don't like the Dutch. 0.2%
We'll have to work on Norway.
Absolutely. For 0.2%. 0.2% India, 0.2% Japan, 0.2% Germany, 0.2% Hong Kong. That's all in the last 30 days.
Okay.
So you sit here and you watch, and you sit here and you say, where is my own country on this? Difficult. Bob Burrell makes another interesting comment here in the SOR Space Travelers. There's no money in radio, and I can attest to that. Back in 1989, I was making $900 a month full-time. I had a wife and a daughter to feed, had to go to welfare to top off so my family could eat and I could put gas in the car. I can tell you this. When I started in radio in 1998, I made less annually. My annual salary was $19,800 annually from the company I worked for. So if you divide that by 12, you're looking at about $1,600 and change a month.
I was about to say 1,500 or so. Yeah.
Okay, I had one like Bob. Oh, we haven't been taxed yet, my friend. We haven't been taxed. Okay, that's that's gross income, literally. Okay, so you sit there and you wonder. Okay, I had a family to feed. I had, my graduation present from college was my ex-wife saying, "Hey, I'm pregnant." So
rent and mortgage.
You have your rent
or mortgage.
You had car payment. Oh, by the way, you got to eat.
Right.
And then I got, I made it to the big city, man. I made it to the big city of Vancouver, and I got a huge raise. Oh, by the way, $19,800 annually in Canada, and I'm a college-educated person. That was, I think, $2,000 to $3,000 less annually than a single parent, let's not just say a mother, but a single parent with 2 children on welfare.
Mm-hmm.
They got paid more than me. Interesting how it works. The media. Yeah. You gotta love it. Eric, tell us about the Forest Moon Paranormal Paraconference, the first annual, coming up this October.
Yeah, October 22nd, 23rd, still free. Gonna stay free. Still the same speakers. We got, let's see, we got S.J. and Russ Wells. They're discussing the other side of the paranormal. And of course, we got you, Dave Scott, Spaced Out Radio, going to be live Spaced Out Radio during the Paracon. We've got experiencers. We've got, I don't have my stuff in front of me. We've got Raven Corvus. She's doing psychology of the paranormal and case management. We've got Joe Teeples. He's going to be telling ghost stories, as well as Ghostology 101. We've got Tyler Allen Standing Bear doing Bigfoot. And along with him doing Bigfoot, he's also going to do a free drawing for 10 people who he will take up in the mountains and go look for Bigfoot. That's a new addition. And on the 23rd, he'll also be doing a workshop for $20 on how to do plaster casting of tracks.
Sounds good, my friend.
Yep, Saturday night we'll have our VIP roundtable. It will be in a restaurant with a bar. And
I am there. I am there.
Yeah, I know you are. And those tickets, we have slots for 24 people. We've sold 1 ticket. They're $20 tickets, and get them now, because they're going to be gone. They will be. I can guarantee it.
Thanks for showing up tonight. Eric, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being there.
To be here.
And we'll talk to you very, very soon. Hold on. Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal filling in for the final hour here on Spaced Out Radio to continue the banter. We want to thank Grant Cameron as well for coming in for the first 2 hours to discuss UFOs, disclosure, and what the United States presidents know on the topic. Reminder, you can follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, I can be followed at Dave Scott, SOR. Our YouTube channel is Spaced Out Radio, and our new look website coming up in just a few short days, spacedoutradio.com. Our music man, Ron Bumblefoot Thal. Bumblefoot, the official music of Spaced Out Radio. He kicks it into high gear for us all the time. We love him around here. It's always a pleasure. I want to say thank you to everyone participating in the Spaced Out Radio chat room on Spreaker. And if you were in the SOR Space Travelers on Facebook, appreciate you coming around. We do this thing 7 days a week, 3 hours a night starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time. And we hope all of you come back once again. Do us a favor. Tell a friend or two. We're trying to build something special, and we need to do that with you, our valued listener. Thanks for checking us out. Oh, Bumblefoot, take us home. Good night.
This is the new totalitarian state. 1,000 eyes are waiting for you to break. Stay in line, don't make a mistake. We're watching. We watched you fall so